In the beginning of the 22nd century, when civilization had achieved an unparalleled level of peace and prosperity, they appeared without warning. On their way to our solar system, they ravaged every planet in their path. And now, they have chosen Earth as their next feeding ground. They cling like parasites to all life forms, minerals, and electronic devices, and their number has multiplied beyond control. People call this evil the Bydo.
Mankind decided to strike back using the just completed multi-dimensional next generation flight method called the R9. However, not one ship ever returned from battle. Earth's last died with the one remaining R9, a ship equipped with a deadly weapons arsenal. All mankind can do is launch this ship and pray.
Hey everybody, we're back.
What?
This week, we're back.
Oh.
So, picking up where we left off, this is the R-Type roundtable we're doing, which I've subtitled the Bydo missions, because that's what R-Type's all about. Blast off and strike the evil Bydo Empire. So, with me as always is Mike.
Hey there, I'm Mike.
And returning...
AKA Sutinga.
Yes.
Sorry.
Stop walking over me.
I'll do it. I'll do that no matter what, on purpose or unintentionally, so.
It's typical. Anyway, also with us, returning from previous roundtables, is Forneia.
Hello, hello.
And
my position in the back art here is incredibly poor.
we are all screwed in that position, okay? That thing's going to wipe us out. Except for maybe Jim, who is flying a basically indestructible pod.
Well, I can say you usually do have to destroy them for their power-ups, but sure.
Yep, we're talking about the second best shooter series of all time now, in my personal opinion.
Unless number one is Tyrion, which is a series of one. I don't know if I'm going to agree with that one.
No, that would be gratis.
Second most influential, I would say. And it does have some very good games in it, but I still think that is a little bit of a bold claim to leave unchecked. Nonetheless, we're talking about R-Type for a reason. I basically do consider it the second godfather of shoot 'em ups as we know them or knew them today alongside Gradius. And, well, okay, I don't want to steal Rob's stream thunder here, so...
I got kittens to do that if I really want to.
I mean, if I interrupt, that means Rob will get the third lightning.
Hey,
for God's
nice tie-in.
Hang on.
Hey, it's Mr. Matthews. It's funny. I mentioned Gradius and Mr. Matthews showed up. And of course, with us here in the chat, we also have Great White North and Bruno, aka BL85 Gamer.
I'm curious what Mr. Matthews' take is on R-Type being the second best shooter series.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about that myself, actually. Now,
Well, pressure's on you, Matt.
We're waiting.
yeah, you might see a little buffering going on because my internet is just being stupid tonight.
It's had one game in a Sega system. You know, I will just like go out and say, having grown up on the Master System version of R-Type and noodling around with the arcade version, that's an incredibly faithful version, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Right, here
System
it
one?
is.
Yes.
Like, I could do the system version in the arcade version, so yes. And the blue laser is also ridiculously good, so yeah, no, very faithful, actually.
I'm getting some buffering on the stream. I'm not sure.
Yep.
Okay, so it gets me. Oh, still.
Yeah, it's doing the thing to me again. Let's see. Okay. Now, okay, here's what it says. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering. Let's see. Suggestion.
What do you have your bitrate set as?
Well, apparently it's currently set at 2161.61, which is what it's always set at. So this is something I can adjust in OBS. It's just one of them weird nights, folks. So let's see.
Yeah, since we have a static image at this point, we could probably get away with dropping that down to like 1500 or something.
Seems more
Yeah.
stable now. BL85 says.
Yeah, I'm still showing it going from green to red to yellow to green to red to yellow. So I guess the question would be, where would I go ahead and make that setting tweak?
Settings, output, and then it'll be like one of the first things at the top. I'm assuming it's going to be you're in a simple output mode. So it'll be like at the top of the streaming window or subsection in settings.
All right, let me see.
Here, I'll just get a screenshot for you.
That'll work.
It occurs. That would be easier than me fumbling over descriptions, which I am bad at.
Yeah, so everyone bear with us. We do want to talk R-Type. We don't want to have to reschedule because of poor performance here. So, all right, let me
It should
see.
look like this.
Yes, let's see.
Well, we're not cutting off, so that's good.
Yep. All right, let's see. Output. It says video bitrate is 2500 kbps. Kind of odd. And it's
I run 6000 over on Twitch because I kind of need that. We have a static image though, so we can leave that, like 1500 or something like that to kind of
Yeah, I'm gonna drop it down.
minimize pipe movement. Yeah.
Okay. Apply and okay. All right, so we're gonna leave it like this and see how it goes. But yes, Well, okay, show me a good connection now. So while we have that, let's just start talking about R-Type. And let's see, R-Type. We've already mentioned the Master System version. That was the first one I started with.
Yep.
I remember, at least I think I remember seeing the original arcade game briefly at a theme park somewhere up in New Hampshire. But I didn't get to play it. And in fact, I don't think I got to play the original arcade game until the R-Types compilation came out. Played the TurboGrafx version before that.
I genuinely didn't even know that R-Type was an arcade game for, like, actual decades.
Wow. I remember I had kind of a hookup back in the day. He got me a copy of R-Types for the Japanese PlayStation. And I remember playing, R-Type in its, full arcade one. It's just that full arcade glory right there. And then seeing R-Type 2, and it's like, fired that up, and it turns out it was actually the real version of what became known as Super R-Type on the Super NES. But we'll get to that one in a minute, because I know Mike's got a lot to say about R-Type 2. But the original is just, it's difficult. Most people will say that, myself included. But it did establish a lot of the recurring, things that would happen throughout the series. Like, for example, the big old xenomorph looking thing there on the screen.
Dobkeratops.
Dobkeratops, Doppelganger, Krell.
He's got even more names than the first game in Taito's Ray Force series has.
Yeah.
So.
And
so I feel like we should probably explain a little more detail just how R-Type functions.
Okay.
Yeah, we might be cutting out a few steps by accident here.
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with R-Type, your basics, besides obviously that it's a side-scrolling shooter, it doesn't require power-ups like a system like Gradius has or anything like that. And you do pick up labeled power-ups as you go along for like missiles, speed up, and all that. It's just that Forneia, I'm going to let you take the Force Pod.
Oh, thank you. Alrighty. So one of the big things that makes R-Type hold distinguishment, I feel, is the fact that unlike a lot of shooters, the ship's core capabilities are actually quite competent already. And as is typical, you have your basic like little shot, and it does what it does, and it does it fine enough. But if you hold the shot button, you will charge the R9's wave cannon, which is totally and absolutely not a reference to Space Battleship Yamato's wave motion gun. No, absolutely not. That would be terrible and wrong.
Yeah, I don't see it at all.
No. No. And the wave cannon is multiple things, but quite strong, is very high on the list of things to mention about that. It will pierce things. It will destroy most enemies in 1 or 2 full charges. It doesn't take that long to charge. And the game is pretty strongly designed around its tactical deployment. And a lot of the fun, I feel, comes from figuring out good spots to actually fire the wave cannon.
Ooh.
So
I want to bring one up in particular. It's in the first stage of the original R-Type when you get to that circle of cannons. And there's that one.
Yep.
You nail that one, you take the whole circle out. It's great.
Yeah, like the game, especially in the first stage, is loaded with points that were just like, use the wave cannon, please. And then beyond that, go ahead.
I was going to say, as any good game should, it kind of teaches you the mechanics. That it's like, here is the perfect opportunity to use this, system.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And as is, typical of, a side score from, the arcade period, are there power-ups? Yes. They're also a little on the atypical side. Instead of things that make the ship itself better for the most part. Instead, you pick up a like little colored power-up capsule and you summon the Force device, which is this thing that will attach to the fore or aft of your ship, and you can also just send it off to do its own thing, and it will act as a secondary gun when decoupled. But when coupled, and you provide it with more power-ups, will provide extra lasers that will deploy depending on which kind you have. You have the anti-air laser, which shoots forward and does a lot of work. You have the reflect laser, which fires 3 lasers, one forward, one each to 45-degree angles from the Force device. And the I forget what the proper name for it is, but the yellow laser.
Search laser?
Search laser? That might be it.
Yes,
Which
when I use
will
the least, I
fire...
know that.
Yeah, which fires directly up and down from the Force device and will just kind of trace along surfaces to find something to hit. And if you attach the Force device to the back of the ship, then all of those things will do the exact same thing backwards, which means that you can take care of things that are behind you while you have the wave cannon to deal with threats in front of you. And in all of this, the Force device has another notable function. It deals constant damage to anything it touches, and it will absorb smaller enemy shots, so it is also a shield. It is incredibly multifunctional, and clever manipulation of the Force device is something that the game very regularly rewards.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
it is true.
an essential mechanic.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is. It is mandatory on the premise that the Bydo are very wily enemies who will constantly assault you from blind spots that your weapons normally might not roam towards, if not even just behind, like even from up and down as well. Basically, this is probably bad form in any shoot 'em up, but if you like hang out on the edge of the screen, there's a good chance that some dingus will just appear there from behind the black, and then you're dead.
Hey there!
Yes. Yeah, positioning is really key with your Force pod, but it is kind of a pain in the ass because you can't just easily switch your pod from forward to backward. You have to fire it out in front of you and then reposition your ship into the pod from the other direction. This maneuver, known as force fumbling, as I will colloquially call it, will probably be like at least a third of your deaths trying to figure out how and when to do this efficiently in any given stage. I would saltily say that this game would be smoother if you could change from forward to backward much easier, but then again, I guess that's not really the R-type way and would thus be sacrilege, so it is what it is.
I feel it's worth noting that when you do detach the Force device, as you say, it fires forward, but continuing to fire the basic shot will cause it to still fire it'll fire, up and down, as well as like forward with like 35-degree arcs for its shots. And that clears a lot of territory, so you can just kind of zip forward still behind it because it will still act as a shield even detached. And then as it kind of corrects back from, the launch, because it does respond to your current position and it does so in kind of an automatically smart way, you can just kind of go forward and hook it on the back while, you're getting away from the things behind you.
That is true, yes. And did we note the pod has 3 levels also? I forget.
I always liked how that
I
looked.
did. Yeah, I didn't make it super clear, but yes, it starts off with 3 levels. The first level is just kind of like an orb with like some rods on the side, and this doesn't do anything other than act as a shield. At second level, the rods extend, so they're kind of like what like a railgun would look like, except the core is the big deal. And this is where you'll actually get your color laser effects. And then the third level, it completely transforms and ends up kind of having sort of like a spidery shell that covers the front of the core and extends behind it. And in all three of these, it's constantly rotating. So it's always it's a visual element that is always in motion. It is never static, and it looks so cool.
It really is. Yeah. Your little orange friend, which I don't know if this was established from Jump, but as the series mythology fleshed out later, it becomes apparent that the Force Pod is actually technically part of Bydo technology.
Yeah, it's appropriated Bydo tech, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of things that look cool when they're animated, I did want to bring up the little bit devices.
Yes, I was going to get to the other power.
Give me the bits, the bits. That's from Steven Universe. Sorry, I had to say.
Silence, Leo. You'll have your day.
Yo.
Yeah, I was going to say, but before we get to the bits, though, I mean, continuing on with the Force Pod itself, it should be said that the levels of the Force Pod also affect the shots that the pod has when it is detached from your ship.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
At the first level, it just fires a single shot forward at the same time that you fire a shot from the R9. At the second level, it's two diagonal shots that I would say probably like a 30-degree angle upwards and downwards.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then when it's fully upgraded at level 3, there are additional shots forward, diagonal at the same angle, and then also straight up and straight down.
Right, yeah, as I mentioned earlier.
So it's like a 5-way shot. Yeah. And another thing with the Force Pod is the button that you use to deploy it almost as a weapon, which, is tied into then, repositioning your ship either, with the Force Pod on the rear or the front. Is that you can use the same button to recall the force as well. And I was going to say it's not instantaneous as like when you fire it as more of a projectile, but you do have limited control over it. So you can recall it to help reposition yourself as well.
I really like the way that the Force device controls when it's not attached to your ship, because it will trace after your ship and try to line up, with the front or the back, to the best of its ability with as if it had like a half-second delay. So you can actually do like some weird strafing maneuvers with it where you can put it in a position where if you were on that horizontal plane, you'd get hit with something, but it's just trailing on through. It doesn't care, and you're able to get stuff done over there. It feels really great whenever you can just like have the Force device be in a spot where you can't be.
This is true. I can't.
And if you go ahead of it, it will kind of it always tries to remain parallel with you on the horizontal axis, but on the opposite side of the screen. So if you're like on the left of the screen, it tries to hang around at like the front third, and if you're at the back, it tries to hang around at the back third. Or if you're at the front, it tries to hang around at the back.
This is a lot more of a technical discussion this game than I expected. Are we going to discuss the scoring?
R-Type is an incredibly technical game. It warrants it.
It is, and
yeah,
it does, sure, but I guess call skill issue on me. I used to be good at the original R-Type. Now I kind of get scared every time I get to the 4th stage, which isn't that bad compared to later levels, but it does kind of feel like where my ceiling usually tends to bottom out unless I'm really focused, and that rarely seems to come around nowadays. Don't get me wrong, though. I do really like the first R-Type still. It establishes conventions so differently than how Gradius and other possible contenders did at the time, and I do also feel that it's very unique graphics have certainly lent it a lot of longevity. I believe this was the M72 board of Irem's family that this ran on. And Irem themselves being... I guess you could call it... feels a little condescending to call them a mid-tier company from back in the day, because they did have quite a few of their own classics in the 80s, but I want to say in many ways R-Type is really their most famous or remarkable or emblematic game of Irem's visual and mechanical design.
I would agree that R-Type is Irem's flagship series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can agree to that.
And also that most of Irem's games tend to be ball-torturingly hard. This established that too, but it is a little more merciful than something else.
Go play Kickle Cubicle and get back to me about it being quote-unquote hard.
I really like Kickle Cubicle.
Yeah, well, okay then. I rest my case.
Well, admittedly, I didn't.
Not bad either.
Admittedly, I stopped after the quote-unquote final boss. I understand the special stages was where it really bears its true fangs, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you want to bring up Irem's other games? I gotta say, I'm a diehard Ninja Spirit fan.
Ninja Spirit is great. Also hard, but I think it mostly minds its P's and Q's until the infamous very last stage thing before the final boss. Until then, it's actually pretty civil. So.
Yeah, but getting back to R-Type. And also, I see we got the TextArc and NeoCAD here in the stream with us.
Hey, the TextArc. TextArc's one of my community members.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, Tex is cool. They're really awesome.
Yes.
So, welcome both of you to the R-Type Roundtable.
Yeah.
Just a note, though. See the ship next to Jim's name?
Mm-hmm.
That is what all the power-ups in R-Type are usually contained in, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yeah, the POW unit.
TP2 POW armor.
Yep.
Another thing that's done differently from Gradius is... Or Gradius, I don't even know anymore. Is that that game had, it gave you more power-ups, but it had its power-up system, and, they were dropped by either A, defeating the last enemy in a squadron, or B, by hitting red-colored enemies. In this game, you get lesser power-ups, but they do more whenever you get them, and they are delivered to you in a designated, very convenient, and if I almost say so, cute little Bydo container.
just a minor nitpick over here. I think you meant to say fewer rather than lesser, because the power-ups in this game are potent.
Yeah, no, that is what I meant. Yeah, I mean, you need less of them to get where you are. Which is, I find a little bit of a
any one power up is a
trade-off.
pretty big deal on its own. It's like, okay, either you're getting the force device, you're going quicker, or you get a bit, or you have missiles. And missiles are great because they'll just fire out and just hit stuff even while you're holding a charge with the wave cannon, so you can actually still exert pressure. Bits are little things that hover to the top and potentially bottom of your ship, which are basically like mini force devices. They will interact with the red laser exclusively, but otherwise will just kind of damage anything that they come into contact with and take shots that are, small enough that the force device can take. And they just chill there, and they're great. And then, of course, you have, speed-ups in which you broadly only need one to maneuver, but maybe two if you're spicy.
Yeah. Any more than that, and it is a liability when you are trying to be subtle in your maneuverability through tighter passages.
And there are many tight passages in R-Type.
Yeah.
R-Type has very specific level design.
Yeah, R-Type...
That's what I was going to mention as well, is... to me, R-Type always feels very claustrophobic as far as shooters go.
Yeah,
and that's definitely by decision, because it forces a lot of encounters into narrow corridors, which is great for you when it happens at the front, because that means everything's lining up for a wave cannon shot.
Yeah, and little side tangent. This is really the actual. This is going to sound condescending for modern, like, quote unquote modern shoot 'em ups, but the concept of actual terrestrial level design feels like a rarity in later shoot 'em ups. Old school shoot 'em ups like Gradius and R-Type actually pride themselves on having obstacles that you need to weave through, and that they are deliberately designed in tandem with the enemies, so that there is the fear of you can't just easily dodge this bullet, you might crash your ship into this conspicuously spiky rock over here. Heck, even something doesn't look like you can just blow up by crashing into it, just like graze it.
I mean, it stands to reason that smashing your spaceship into a rock or an object of some kind is probably not wise.
Pilot error.
Yeah, it's like basically old school shoot 'em up of this caliber treats everything as lava except for the space where you can maneuver. So
Now, speaking of the obstacles and whatnot in R-Type, obviously there's a lot of technological stuff in the game, but there is a disturbing amount of organic stuff too. Mm-hmm. Some of which has some very, very, very overt, what would be the word you'd use? Say, for the Stage 2 boss of the original R-Type?
the Gomander, as it were. AKA the Sis. That's been relatively consistent.
Anatomical?
Anatomical, yes.
Geiger-esque, or Giger-esque. I still don't know how the hell to pronounce his last name.
Well, that'd be like the Krell right there.
Giger. It is Giger, actually. Okay. But yes, H.R. Giger, the late, great, fantastic Swiss artist with all of his very disturbing bioorganic designs. I feel like, like the director, or like lots of Irem staff was just a huge fan of his works, and they like, why not make our own game where everything's all bioorganic and weird and corrupted? And that was, for its time, I think, a very original artistic decision to take, whereas, like, most shoot 'em ups were more mechanical, or like out in the open, blue oceans and green forests, and warplanes taking over them. R-Type, I think, really opened the door for like creepy organic levels, which basically became a common staple in shoot 'em ups. In fact, funny thing, the first Gradius, except for its last boss being a giant brain, and like the 6th level also being this weird blue icky substance, compare in later, that was like the first game. It was mostly mechanical otherwise and relatively tame in its organic creepiness. Compare and contrast after R-Type, where we have the last levels in Gradius 2 and the NES and Gradius 3, which are really gross and lumpy. And
I think what you're trying to say in summary is R-Type is the progenitor of body horror shooters.
That's a good way of putting it. Yes,
it's like an earlier attempt at that would have been Salamander about a year before R-Type, but it didn't quite get to the same level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hey, what was the Life Force revision after R-Type? Because that'd be pretty funny if that were the case.
I'd have to check, but it might have been about. Yeah, I think actually it may have been.
Well, there you have it.
And
Konami plagiarized Irem.
Well, not really until however you pronounce that game.
Well,
EX.
Zexix. Zexix.
That's basically Konami's right there.
That's more a direct plagiarism.
Yes.
But as far as like the Giger-esque design, that would later feature quite heavily in Contra as well.
Yeah,
that is true. Yes.
And something else I want to bring, because I don't recall ever seeing this in a shooter before R-Type, it actually is the entirety of Stage 3. Yeah, the mega
battleship level.
The famous, the most famous, I want to say the most iconic level, even more than the first level, if you can believe it.
So much that it actually ended up being parodied by Konami in a couple of the Proteus games.
That is true, right?
Yeah,
and then you
they
fought
did.
like the giant floating Moai head afterward.
Yeah, the
right.
Moai battleship. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But that thing, if anyone was here from the beginning and saw the opening video, you got to see it in action.
Mhm.
And if anyone's familiar with the NES game Metal Storm,
Yay!
a fleet of those things makes a cameo, I think, right around stage 7 or so.
Nice.
I think-
Everyone play Maelstrom if you haven't. I love that game.
Oh yeah, Metal Storm's great.
There's also Irem, by the way. So
Yeah.
it's not another company
Unsurprisingly.
copying.
Nope.
Exactly.
Yep, it's all Irem. But yeah, that mega battleship blew my mind the first time I ever saw it.
It still
And,
is incredibly amazing, in my opinion. Just this massive, I guess you could call it a huge interconnected sprite. Like, maybe there's some trickery in, like, subdividing the parts of the ship, and, like, many of them are detachable and you blow them off, but, like, I really want to know how those graphical wizards did that.
I'm going to guess offhand that the ship itself, with everything destroyed, is merely a background layer that moves around. And then everything is overlaid over it as either background layers that give way or that sprites that detach.
That is possible, yes.
Makes sense to me.
It's really cool.
That's how a lot of things were done with larger boss enemies and on NES, I know, and I assume that it's the same technology with the arcade boards and all.
Anyway, BL85 shoutouts. I grew up playing Abadox, and yes, that one might be the apotheosis of grotesque shoot 'em up body horror, but I'm sure that Natsume did owe a fair debt to Irem on that premise nonetheless. So,
Hey,
speaking
Carla,
of,
welcome in.
Yeah, hi, Carla. Speaking of body horror shooters, Irem would actually one-up themselves later on with the X Multiply.
X Multiply
game.
is cool. Tough, but it's an Irem game, so it's kosher sauce. But yeah,
I'm
I
not
really like that
familiar
one.
with that one.
I almost consider that one an honorary, like, sort of. I want to say it's an R-Type spin-off, even though I'm not sure there's anything that's officially confirmed on that end. But it
An
feels like
internal homage.
Yeah.
yes, that's a good way
Yeah.
of putting it. In fact, one of the ships in R-Type Delta does feel like it is influenced by the tentacles that this game had.
Yep,
But
the tentacle force on the Albatross in Delta is definitely inspired by the X Multiply.
yeah.
You know,
Also,
I was just thinking with the amount of ships you can use in the final games, wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Irem was trying to go ahead and create some kind of a shared universe with all their shooters, like Namco did.
Oh, they definitely were by final.
5 years before the MCU. I don't know why I did that like that, but yeah.
You know something, Mike?
Yeah.
You know, you're just
I deserve that and all the other ones I'm going to get tonight.
oh, did you ever?
Crossovers and shared universes have existed long before the MCU.
I mean, yeah, no, they're always a thing in comics alone, like Crisis on Infinite Crises or whatever the hell, I don't know.
I was even thinking like the Godzilla Ultraman crossover.
Hey, actually, you know what? Mothra versus Godzilla was a crossover.
Godzilla versus King Kong.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to see Godzilla -1 tomorrow, so I've really got Godzilla on the brain, by the way.
Just as I don't get that title. Anyway,
I'll tell you later.
okay. Now, okay, without really going into detail about the rest of the game, because, you know, honestly, you could look up a long play or whatnot. I personally have never gotten past Stage 5. Except in
Stage
one,
5's a jerk, yeah.
except in
Stage
one
5
case.
is basically the first, like, actually hard level.
The
4 is the one where, like, the difficulty starts to spike, but really it's not that bad as long as you, like, don't try to, like, shoot down everything or panic twitch. It's very much a level that teaches you to think about where you're going and why.
Yeah,
Well-
no spoilers, please.
Here's the thing, Bruno. What happens at the end is that the screen turns black and a whole bunch of names start going up.
This does actually happen. No, wait. No, actually, you don't even really get a credits roll. Oh, wait,
No.
that's a spoiler.
Uh-oh.
You get text. You get text. I will say that.
Well, I wanted to go ahead and bring up some of the ports that come out.
This game was really frickin' ported a lot.
Well,
Holy crap.
It's like there's a reason for that or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
right.
it's cool and influential, and it deserves it, yes.
What?
And
I know.
really good.
One thing that really surprised a lot of people was that the original, the first port, as far as I know, ended up on the Master System instead of the NES.
And interestingly, there never was a Famicom or NES port of R-Type.
Now, there is a weird bootleg out there called Magic Dragon, which someone actually hacked it into R-Type.
I remember the bootleg skeleton Dobkeratops. Just looks so freaking uncanny.
And
Like,
it's like,
even for an weird orange alien giant, it is still uncanny nonetheless.
and stage 2 looks like you're flying through a salad. One thing I wanted to bring up about the Master System version in particular, though, well, two things. One, the port job was handled by Compile.
Oh, nice.
That would go a long way to explain why it's such a good port.
Exactly. And
Like you can totally get away with like all kinds of like dirty tricks that you can in both versions as a result. Like the second and third level bosses, you can kill in a single wave cannon shot if you know exactly where to position yourself at the right time.
Sharon, there was. We'll get to that one eventually.
yes.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to bring up about the Master System port was the secret stage.
Yeah.
That's right.
It was exclusive to that version, and you could only get to it by actually running your R9 into a special part of the level, and it would take you to this completely new stage, which even had its own really freaky looking boss. It was like
I never knew this actually, which is really weird considering that I used to play this game back in the days when I actually had full-time work. Before I went to work every single day. Like, that was my routine. I would do one run of this.
And you didn't know about the secret stage?
No.
Wow. Well, yeah, it's everything in there is brand new. It's like there's the only thing that recurs from the actual game as you know it is the force mods.
Wow.
So it's all sorts of weird stuff in there, but that boss is really cool looking. It's like
Is it just like filled with like compile references or something?
no, it's just they just kind of reached into their creative hat and said, "Okay, let's do some weird stuff."
It's very red. It's a very red and blue level, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I
Yes.
was going to say it. The design of it is very reminiscent of Life Force,
Mm-hmm. And in fact,
of like the first stage from Life Force, I should say.
which brings me to something else. There's actually a homebrewer right now who's working on a port of the original game to the Mega Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be called Mega R-Type, and he's actually included the secret stage.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
You can get the demo right now, and there's 3 stages that are available to play. The secret stage is one of them. So I may go ahead and throw that up in the video description later for anyone who wants to check it out. Bruno, we're not listening to you. Now,
Wait.
wait, what? We're waiting. Mike, what?
I just said quiet you, that's all. I
Oh.
didn't.
Sounded like you said, wait.
Yeah, I
No.
heard wait, but
No. Jeez.
And now, if I remember correctly, there was also a couple of Game Boy ports.
there were.
I do know of one for R-Type 2. I'm not aware of one for 1.
I think there was R-Type for the original Game Boy, and then there was like an R-Type DX for the Game Boy Color.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I've ever played them, though. So has anyone here played those?
I've played the first on Game Boy, which it's decent. It is a truncated version of the game. I believe there's only 5 stages in it, as opposed to what was it? Was it 7 or was it 8? In
The original had 8.
8. Yeah, that's what I was thinking was 8. So
Which
yeah, I
is-
believe there's some...
That's actually something funny I wanted to dwell on, because by technical definition, I think this is still the quote-unquote longest R-type, because all
I
other
believe you're
feature
right.
games had 6 or 7, so... I mean, those later stages got more elaborate, certainly, like how Contra 3 did over the first 2 Contra games, but... Uses me. I guess they figured that 8 felt like it was getting a little long in the tooth at that point. I don't know what the logic behind that is. It's just
I mean, in fairness, the levels in R-Type are pretty short. Like, the first level is
Yeah.
like a minute long, not counting the boss.
Yeah.
for the most part, they're only a couple minutes. All the time you spend on them is going to be restarting over and over.
Get good.
Shut up.
Yeah, I guess we didn't mention R-Type is of the kind of classical shooter style with checkpoints instead of automatic or
Yeah.
respawning immediately
Yeah.
where you die.
Yeah, it kind of predates Revival as a
Right,
as a
yeah, there
stage
you go.
shooter mechanic.
Indeed.
Right.
Yep.
Which ties in a bit with Gradius syndrome, where you can reach a point where it becomes very difficult to recover at certain checkpoints in the game.
Usually they're pretty good about that because
They are.
all of them have 1 or 2 POW pods that spawn very shortly after the checkpoints, but a couple of them do feel like they're not quite enough, but that's usually like down to like 1 or 2 spots for the most part.
Yeah, for the most part, you don't have to walk back as long a road as you do in Gradius, because since I clumsily said earlier, you don't need as many power-ups to get back to full power. And,
And 2, you still have the wave cannon, which is still pretty much your bread and butter.
yeah, exactly. So,
it is much more forgiving than Gradius as far as that goes.
yeah,
Like,
for the most... Yeah.
I do feel that it's entirely reasonable to just do like a no force run and just use nothing but the wave cannon and maneuvering. I think it's entirely reasonable to do that hard, but not unreasonable.
Yeah, I think that would be feasible. I don't think I could ever do that, but R-Type is often sort of considered a major proponent of quote-unquote trial and error design, where the checkpoints are sort of ingrained with the expectation that when you restart from there, you will eventually find out where and when to be as the screen scrolls on in certain stages and how it corresponds with the level design, and you will die many times before you figure out how to run it through like a ballet choreographed dance, which... While I am kind of mixed on that paradigm of game design, I will say, I think for the most part, the first R-Type is not quite that bad in most respects, except the latter half of Stage 7. That stage blows and I hate it.
Now, I don't know if there were any PC ports at all that were done.
Yeah, a lot. Amiga at the very... C64 and Amiga at the very least. I'm sure there's been others.
I know there's a TurboGrafx R-Type port.
Oh, well,
That one's worth
that's
mentioning.
a famous port. Yes, definitely.
Interestingly enough, in Japan, it was released on 2 Hue cards because the game was so big. And
Sorry, LDP made a pretty good comment. I'm sorry.
what, pain in the arse type?
Yeah.
Hey,
Not
Thumb's here.
wrong in most cases, and Hey Thumb has a
Hey, Thumb.
So yeah, if you ever were to buy the Japanese version of R-Type for the PC Engine, and you saw R-Type 1 and R-Type 2, you wouldn't be getting a port of R-Type 2. It would be the second half of the game.
That is very confusing. Isn't it called R-Type Part 2? Or
Nope, just R-Type 2.
Wow, that's false advertising. Retroactive false advertising.
Well, when they released the Turbo over here, they actually had Hue cards that had more memory, so they were able to fit the whole thing on one. The only downside to that was there's a little more flicker.
Dang.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the TurboGrafx port of the game was pretty close to arcade accurate. The only thing is that there was a bit of vertical scrolling to fit everything
Yes.
on the screen.
This is
Yeah,
true.
I actually got it over the what's it called? Oh dang it, the Wii thing, not Wii Shop, the other one.
Oh, a virtual console?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I actually picked that up over the Virtual Console on the Wii once upon a time, and I can confirm, yeah, it does have like a little bit of vertical scroll, but it does have like the live score and beam gauge elements of the HUD. It should be noted the Master System version does not have any vertical scrolling, but it also has no HUD elements, so you don't really
Right.
know what your score or any of that is until you die, which, in fairness, you don't need to worry about any of that, and the beam is something you very much just get a feel for. It doesn't take long to charge, so the specifics of the beam is not important in that sense, so you can totally get away with it.
Now,
I believe there's a bit of a graphical indication too, as far as like the particles in front of the R9.
Yeah, the particles like come in and like you just kind of be like, okay, okay.
now,
Might even be an audio cue, but
No, there isn't. Not in the
There's
Master
not.
System.
not in that one. Okay.
Now, LDP was asking how you'd swap out the Hue cards on the PC Engine. It is literally just a password that you have to put in when you load up R-Type, quote unquote, 2. So it's like you reach the end of R-Type 1 and it gives you a password, and you just pop in 2 and put your password in and go from there.
Funny thing is, I believe Konami's Track and Field actually had its like 8 games, sub-games divided into 2 halves, and then that actually was recombined into just one whole package in the American version. So R-Type more or less did the same thing. It took the first 4 levels for the first part and the latter 4 levels. So R-Type Easy and R-Type Hard, they should have called it.
Yeah. Yeah, but Track and Field's kind of the same way as you put it. Just, I know in Japan they called them for the Famicom. It's like, and I think for the MSX too, it was like Hyper Sport and Hyper Olympic.
Yeah, something like that.
So, but yeah, same kind of concept. Now, rather than spending any more time on the original, let's move on to R-Type 2.
Oh, you mean fuck this game, the game.
That's the one.
Jesus. Well, go on, explain R-Type 2 a bit before I
R-Type
unleash
2
my
is the
mental
sequel
frustration.
to R-Type.
Wow, what a shock!
Basically, R-Type was so successful, they decided to make it 2, and they also just kind of put their heads together at IRM and said, hey, you know how hard the first one was? Let's crank the difficulty up to 15 this time.
So, I said that, like, for the most part, like, the R-Type is relatively calm for the first 3 or 4 stages, depending, and it really cranks up the heat in the latter stage, and the only stage I really have any gripes with is stage 7. Every stage in R-Type 2 after the first stage is stage 7. If not fucking worse. God, even as soon as stage 2, most games usually wait until stage 3 to kick you in the nuts. No, 2 has those stupid goddamn silverfish thingies that just rocket towards you when you kill them.
Basically,
So to take things at a bit more of a pace, R-Type 2 features, the R9 now with a wave cannon that can be overcharged, and you get the dispersion wave cannon, so that ends up just branching out and hitting all kinds of stuff, giving some multi-target and angular capabilities to the wave cannon. Which is really neat.
The super,
and the Force device has, I think it's 2 new laser types, which I don't know exactly the name. I think one of them is the shotgun laser, and then another one which is kind of more of a kind of more like a point defense sort of thing. It just fires a bunch of stuff out at kind of like point blank and just causes explosions.
As I recall, first off, I will say that despite my grievances of R-Type 2, that the hyper wave cannon is actually legitimately cool. And
Hyper's 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say hyper is technically 3.
Yeah, 2 has
Oh.
the dispersion wave cannon.
Okay, dispersion, being technical, but yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And the gray weapon you get, which shoots out these sort of like little bombs in front of you and reminds me of the gravity bullet from Gradius Guidance Falcon and Beta, that's actually a pretty cool weapon, and I guess it wasn't seen after this game for better or worse. The green weapon sucks ass, though. It's just like these weedy little semi-homing lasers that just... I don't know. It just feels very underwhelming. Funny enough, for this game's quote-unquote SNES port, which we'll get to later, that weapon's completely changed, and it still sucks. So, I guess someone felt later that giving 5 weapons was kind of taking the piss or the mick or however it's called. So, from this game onward, they just resorted to 3 power-up colors from then on.
In fairness, as someone who's colorblind, I genuinely don't know what half of the device lasers are supposed to be. I know what the classic 3 are: yellow, blue, and red, and I know which laser corresponds to what. I couldn't tell you what the other 2 are supposed to be.
Now,
Because I can't tell.
Gray and green, but yes.
correct me if I'm wrong. There's also a kind of a ground bomb you can pick up too, right? That travels along.
Oh
the
yeah,
ground for
yeah.
walls.
It's a missile.
Yeah.
It's a missile alternate. Yes.
Yeah, it's
which I
like
think
napalm.
I think having 2 different missiles is also another thing that later games ditched, if I'm not mistaken, but I might be. So yeah, R-Type 2 is like the first, but evil, and it hates you, and all my rants are going to devolve in this. You guys better just go ahead before I think of something more thoughtful to say, if I ever do, so.
Well, I do want to bring up something that's pretty cool about the first boss.
Oh, yes,
When you get to it, it's this, huge mechanical thing, but sure, you can kill it just by blasting the part in its abdomen that opens up. But if you go up and unleash a couple of, wave cannon shots at its head, the helmet will break, and you'll see that thing that's on the screen right now is actually what's in there.
Yep. Subkeratops and subatomic.
Yeah. Again, with the different names.
I come for you again. This time with armor. Oh no, my weakness is still the same, and I am dumb.
Yeah, funny enough, Dobkeratops is actually a recurring villain. In fact, this isn't the last time that we see it pop up again.
Oh yeah, he shows up quite a bit.
He's besides maybe the POW armor, he's practically the series mascot. And the R9, yeah, of course, but...
Well, I can think of at least 3 R-types where he appeared on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I believe there's more games that do not feature Dobkeratops on the cover than do.
Yeah.
I know.
And only one game I can think of off the top of my head that doesn't have him at all, but, that one's a special exception, so...
Yeah. But he shows up on the cover of the Mark III version and the Master System version. 2 completely different pieces of artwork. And I think that's supposed to be him on the cover of Super R-Type.
It looks very weird and green, and its face is fucked up, but yeah, I think that is supposed to be it.
Yeah. It's a memorable boss. What can you say?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It may go down easily, but it looks really cool. Although it would get wilier later, let's say.
But what I'm thinking here is that when they were programming this thing is that they were like, yeah, in 30 years, this guy Mike, and he's really going to get easily triggered, so let's make this one as hard as possible. And
yeah, that
was totally the thought process.
Yep. So,
well, I don't want this to be all about Mike is angry at R-Type 2. What do you people think first?
What do you mean, you people?
yeah.
That sounded very condescending. I apologize. That's my defense.
Your defense is a duck.
Yes, quack type.
Oh boy. Yeah, you know what that gets, right?
Wow. Hey, I did one, you did one.
Exactly.
Well,
The Q is right next to R in the alphabet.
I'm really interested in the Gosling laser.
You know, it feels like something that should have been an R-Type final if it wasn't, but anyway. So.
Yeah, I don't mind R-Type 2. I'm even worse at it than I am the original.
Because it hates everyone.
Yeah.
Including you.
I do like the opening, though. It's only like 3 seconds long, but it's still really cool.
That is neat, yeah. This laser burns the logo in before it gets all metallicized. That is really neat, yeah.
I think Rob may have been talking about the launch sequence.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, the launch sequence. The laser part's pretty cool.
Yeah.
My bad. Yeah, this ran on a slightly more advanced arcade board than the original. I want to say it's like the 81, but I don't remember the exact name. So it does look similar, but there are a few punch-ups to the graphics while still more or less maintaining the visual consistency of the first game. And I will admit this is a good-looking game. The first R-Type had several, half the stage's backgrounds were black. That is not the case where most of the stages in this game have full-on backgrounds that also have, I believe, different parallax to what's... Well, no, I guess the first game had parallax. It's a very neat-looking game, whatever the case, if I will give it any credit. So,
yeah, I don't know this for a fact, but I always felt like the original R-Type looked 8-bit, and the sequel had more of a 16-bit aesthetic.
I can kind of see
Like
that.
I said, I don't know as if that's actually the case or not, but
If you're looking at the Master System port, then okay, but like the arcade R-Type, no, not really.
Yeah.
I think the arcade original could have been done on the SNES, but it wasn't. I guess.
Of course it could, because they put R-Type 2 on the SNES.
Yes,
and
exactly.
called it Super R-Type, and that's the version I'm more familiar with.
It is actually. I don't know. Go ahead.
That was the first version R-Type 2 I ever played was Super R-Type.
I think that was the only official version of R-Type 2 we got in the West.
For a while.
Yes.
For a long while,
Eventually, they did release like Dimensions and other stuff that had like collections on it. But
yeah, I do want to go into those before we get into Leo. But I also wanted to say I remember at the time when R-Type 2 came out in arcades that the U.S. game magazines were falling all over themselves, just raving about it. So yeah, Super R-Type was R-Type 2.
Yeah, Super R-Type was actually my first exposure to the series. I had that one growing up, and
that's why you're bitter.
Yeah, that does explain quite a bit. It is, well, I'm not sure if we talked much about the original arcade port, how much we do want to say. The original game is only 6 stages compared to its predecessor's 8, but those stages feel longer and, of course, a good deal more grueling. I think the first stage more or less minds its P's and Q's, and it does have a real banger of a track, but afterwards it's like you go into this water cave and there are these little asshole sacks that pop up from the ground, and there are those fish that run into you, and a very phallic-looking boss at the end, like very blatantly.
I'm just going to say that was a very unfortunate selection of words that you just admitted back there.
I want to say it was semi-intentional on my part, but yeah, no. This game gets unsubtle in those matters sometimes. So.
Very unsubtle.
Extremely.
Something worth mentioning, though, regarding Super R-Type is that it had the first stage in Super R-Type is not in the arcade game.
Yeah, it's completely original. It's like this fight out in space in front of what looks like Saturn at some point.
Like both of them are space stages, but they're both done very differently, and they're both good in their own ways.
And
More typing of the dead.
Or typing of the dead. There's something else worth mentioning about that opening stage in Super R-Type. The background for that is actually different between the Super Famicom and Super NES versions.
Wow, I don't think I knew that.
If I recall correctly, the Super Famicom one has more of a giant planet in the background, whereas the Super NES one just has a couple of planets in the background, smaller ones. So,
Interesting. I'm not sure I ever took notice of that. But yeah, Super R-Type is a pretty bizarre port. It has actually one stage more than the arcade version. The first stage is completely original. The second stage is one of the few stages that's just like verbatim from the arcade. It's the first stage from the arcade version. Third level was mostly level 2 from the arcade, except the boss was completely different since maybe Nintendo thought that the original boss was too penis-looking and they asked them to change it. Because that was Nintendo back in the day.
The theming is also different on that one. It's like more biological looking in the arcade version, whereas in Super R-Type it seems more like just kind of like a jungle gone wrong.
Yeah, it feels more like a calmer
more
nature
planty.
Alien, yeah. The fourth stage is weird because it takes the idea of the third stage of R-Type 2, which I hate. It's like, hey, the battleship was cool. Let's just make this stage. Let's just throw multiple battleships at you in this level, which feels like it's really gilding the lily and is not as cool as the original was. It is, in fact, I find a very annoying level. And in the SNES version, it's like the same concept, except I forget if it is more than one ship this time or if it is kind of more classic, but the giant warship sprite causes terrible slowdown. Actually, slowdown is actually a controversial issue with Super R-Type overall, but it is really bad in Stage 4 particular.
You should try the SA1 patch.
Yeah, I saw that. Funny enough, it speeds up the game enough that the music doesn't get to finish. So, that is one thing I did want to say about Super R-Type. It has, with the exception of the second stage music, i.e. the first stage music from the arcade, it has a completely new soundtrack, which I'm not going to lie, I actually like more than the original arcade version. It actually gets pretty jazzy at times.
Also,
I think it's cool for what it is, but yeah.
On a side note, too, that really cool launch sequence from the arcade game has been replaced with like a side view launch sequence where you get a couple little dudes walking around prepping the ship, and then they,
they give the launch order of just pointing forward, go.
Yep, and it's like they hoist the thing up on a crane and just shoot it out.
Yep.
Yeah, also
which is also cool, just in a different direction.
Yes, exactly.
And the side.
One thing that should be mentioned about Super R-Type is that the checkpoints from the arcade version are missing in Super R-Type.
Yeah, that's kind of the big thing about Super R-Type. It's like, it would be kind of its own thing, except they made the decision to have no checkpoints. At all, ever. Start at the beginning of the stage every time. And Super R-Type does not have a POW device that is going to, a POW unit that's going to give you what you need at the start of every level. So checkpointing is non-existent, and restarting from the start of a level actually really rough here. So that's kind of why Super R-Type is rather infamous, whereas, OG R-Type was quite reasonable in its checkpointing maneuvers. Super R-Type is kind of the hard opposite of that without, completely changing things.
Yeah,
It's like
as if I didn't hate that. Go ahead.
Let's say it has its own little baseball bat that it's just waiting to smack you with.
Yeah, like, as if I didn't hate the arcade version enough, like, this is just beyond the pale. Although the penultimate stage in the arcade version is completely thrown out, the one with those asshole ships that just fly in and create mostly indestructible blocks. So that was replaced with a less vicious option, in my opinion, but, the last stage is more or less preserved, and that one has the Dogras, these yellow-armed little shit fucks who I really hate and take too much punishment. I thing of it is, I'm not sure if I ever actually beat R-Type 2. My memory is genuinely cloudy on winning a divisive victory. I remember getting to the final boss, but I don't remember if I actually clinched it, or if I just went home, or if I just gave up in frustration and said, this is not fucking worth it, so...
It's a repressed memory, Mike.
Yeah, until I actually do it again for real nowadays, I'll never know for sure, but... I'm not sure if it's worth the effort.
I'm laughing that as Satanga's blood pressure is rising over there, our view count is also rising.
What? So if I get angrier, we get more viewers.
I don't think you're the internet's Hulk. Take it easy.
Reminds me of that Simpsons episode with Angry Dad, which was actually a surprisingly good one.
PTSD, right?
Okay.
I just saw that too.
Wiener, yes, exactly. But
type.
I will say R-Type 2 was what it needed it to be, which was just more R-Type, but naturally harder, because I believe the direction that most old-school sequels would take is to be like the first, but harder. Unless they took the Castlevania 2 route or whatever and just did something completely different, but that depends. So
it kind of makes sense because with OG R-Type, it's like, okay, what are your contemporaries? What are the peers at the time? And like I'm thinking like something like Xanac or something, which is in a mechanical sense a much more simple game.
Yeah.
So here's this game that has, this charge shot that is, a major gameplay element with stages designed around its utilization, this, shielding orb thing that protects you and gets better over time because you don't really upgrade the ship itself, you upgrade that unit for the most part. And it just has all of these very large divergencies from, SDGs of the time. So I think it stands to reason that on the whole, it is easier just to ease people into what this game is asking of its player.
Yeah.
And then so like anyone who was in for that and was good enough at it to, keep going is going to understand, okay, I understand how these systems work, so I can engage with something that's more complex, and that I don't think that's unreasonable on the face of it.
Yeah. Now I will agree with you to that extent. That's a likely thought process, and it was a natural enough direction to take. I just think they went a little too far in whatever that direction was, and for graciousness' sake, I feel that future games were, while not necessarily less vicious, a little more accommodating overall to people who might not have played R-Type before. Like, R-Type 2 really feels like a sequel in the sense that it's for the people who have mastered the first game, and
yes.
like I said, that's something that goes into a lot of...
It is very much a
processes.
sequel as opposed to a next entry.
See,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
what I said at the top of our discussion about R-Type 2 was correct. It is the sequel to R-Type.
Yes.
I think the best comparison for mission pack sequels like these that are like the first one but harder, it is the Japanese Super Mario Brothers 2 of shoot 'em ups. Is that fair?
To a degree.
The Lost Levels version, as it were.
I'd say that's analogous enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's worth mentioning... you had something to add, Jim?
But go ahead, Dyer.
I was going to say, it's worth mentioning that both R-Type and R-Type 2 have been available in one package in a couple of different forms over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first was R-Types for the PlayStation. And it had a host of different options you could turn on while you're playing the game, like, like what Forneia was saying earlier about, the screen going up and down and whatnot, or keeping it frozen. But something else that it had that no other port has ever had was this thing called R's Library. And that literally breaks down the whole history of the Bydo conflict. Shows you the entire history of the R series.
Yeah.
All the enemies, and there's even a thing where you can play around with polygonal models of the ships and stuff. You can rotate them and just check them out from all these different angles. It's really cool.
Yeah, really neat set of bonuses, and as I recall, those ports were actually really dead on, too. Surprisingly low on loading times, as you might expect from other PlayStation CD-based ports around the time. So, I believe R-Types was actually my first exposure to the 2 proper arcade games, so I was really glad to have that.
Yeah, it was for me, too. And also, the Japanese version of R-Types, since it was released kind of, I'm going to say, like, to just kind of judge what the public's reaction would be to a new R-Type game, they actually included a preview of R-Type Delta on there. Which,
nice.
So, it was just a short video, that's all. But still, you got enough people psyched about it. They took that out of the US one completely. Yeah. And I saw there was some discussion in the chat about this. There was R-Type Dimensions that came out later on. Which the big thing about that is you can actually switch from the original graphics to, polygonal kind of angled versions of them.
Mm-hmm.
I was aware of that coming out on the Xbox Live Arcade. Yep. I don't know if it had any other platforms that it was on.
I think it came to Steam at some point.
It's been around. It's gotten ported to a lot of different stuff, as I recall.
Yeah, something that
on Switch too.
I'm checking it right now. Yeah, R-Type Dimensions EX is on Steam, and I actually own it. So, and a cool thing that Dimensions also does is that it includes a quote-unquote infinite mode where it does allow you to continue on the spot, which purists might balk at, but I, for one, appreciate that people who aren't as skilled at shmups as other people can get to see this game through to the end legitimately, so that is cool. Anyway, I am mostly exaggerating my hate for R-Type 2. I do think it did what it needed to, and by most accounts, it's still a fun enough game to play, but if I ever do actually replay it and try to beat the final boss and actually have a memory of it, I'm probably going to need some hard liquor to do so.
Oh no, Mike's calming down.
I don't think that's how you preserve your memories, Satanga.
Point. Anyway,
Mike's calming down. Our viewership is going down. Get angry, Mike.
Okay. Fuck Super R-Type then. I can at least say that.
One thing to mention with the R-Type 2 also, I guess from more of kind of a story and lore standpoint, the ship that you pilot is actually a later generation than the R9 Arrowhead that you pilot in the first R-Type. And what I thought was an interesting detail is the final boss in R-Type 2 actually is composed of 4, I believe, defeated R9s that have kind of been assimilated into it. And, I just kind of like the story implications that, it's like, essentially they tried to fight off this second Bydo threat, and you can kind of see that it didn't go well, which just kind of from a story standpoint kind of establishes that part of R-Type as well.
Yeah,
it's I think it's really neat because it's like, okay, the whole thing about the Arrowhead's whole journey is it was a prototype ship that was launched out as a last-ditch, desperate effort, and it ended up working out. Second wave comes, and it's like, okay, we've been able to at least finish our prototyping on this one. We're able to mass produce this thing. If this worked out great last time, we should be good. Oh no, we're in an arms race with a biomechanical empire. This is horrifying.
Oh, yes. The series mythology actually does expand rather interestingly later on that premise. Little sidebar. I forget if this is the official take, but I read that the R in R-Type might stand for round type, referring to the round canopy of the R9 Arrowhead and the R9 series. So, it's a protagonist-based title.
Hard to
I
say.
think.
I've never seen that.
Maybe.
I
That's
remember-
something
I want to say I encountered something like that. The R does somehow refer to the canopy
So-
type.
One thing that I remember someone saying on GameFAQs once upon a time that I think is not true was that R-Type and K-Type are different kinds of reproductive systems, with R-Type being the more like one but strong offspring, whereas K-Type would be the many but weak type offspring, like that of insects or, some fish. And, K-Type being the Bydo and the R-Type being, humans and, the R9 ships and that kind of thing. But I can't find anything to back that up. Like, I can't find the terms R-Type or K-Type in reference to those subject matters at all. So it could be that was just someone's fevered imaginings. If someone can, verify this one way or another, I'd actually like to know.
Just a really quick search. I found this link that I posted in the chat. R and K reproductive strategy.
All right, well, there we go.
Yep.
So that is really goddamn thoughtful. If that was the actual thought process behind that.
Yeah.
Well, considering the biological nature of Bydo, it makes a lot of sense.
That's a really smart title in that case.
Now,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah.
just for another sidebar here, real quick.
Another.
I've been following along with the chat, and I've seen the last couple of things that LDP has posted. So, LDP, this is for you.
Yeah, the Russia in communist Russia, it's R-Type.
And
That was the weakest one of them. The rest of them I like.
this stream has been rated R type.
See, I like that one.
Yeah.
And PTSD type is the best one.
Yeah,
That is accurate for R-Type 2 in particular, maybe most of the series in general.
that's what Mike's got.
Yeah.
No, the whole R-Type K-type thing. That's it's kind of interesting. Something that I hadn't heard before. But
Yeah.
I mean, reproduction, I guess, kind of becomes the theme throughout the series as well.
Oh, does it?
Oh yeah. I mean, even as early as R-Type 1, there's definitely implications with given elements.
Yes.
Yeah, Gomander.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Gomander.
The battleship.
It's
Yeah,
very
that
phallic
one too.
looking core, which is the boss. Yeah, and the final boss is like a baby with a beard or something, and it's weird.
Beard.
I don't know how to better pronounce it. I guess that's spoilers, so maybe I shouldn't have said
I'm just thinking of the mobster baby meme now as the lead of the Bydo. With the ship dead.
Final boss of R-Type 1, I'm still not quite sure how I'm supposed to read that sprite, but it always just looks like some bearded green gnome or something whose head opens up into a giant mouth.
It is a very strange looking final boss, which I appreciate. That it makes it so alien and only vaguely like things that we register in our human minds, but not exactly like those things. That's the true definition of an alien entity, in my opinion.
Yeah, something sufficiently incomprehensible.
Well, at this point, I think we've talked R-Type 1 and 2 to death. So,
Yep.
let's switch gears a little bit here and move on to the final R-Type arcade game, which never made it out of Japan.
The secret best one!
I'll
shut up.
R-Type Leo. This is an unusual R-Type game, to say the least.
Very. In fact, I should say up front that it was originally intended to not be an R-Type game. It was going to be a completely original shoot 'em up on Irem's bill, which isn't unheard because they've done X Multiply and Dragon Breed among others. Oh, and the Image Fight games also.
Oh yeah.
So I forget why this one was eventually reconverted into an R-Type game, except maybe just for brand recognition's sake. I think I read something further about it, but my internet's pooping out. My browser's pooping out on me right now, so I can't look it up. What is this? Uh-oh. Hey, are you guys still there?
I'm
yeah,
still
yeah,
here.
still hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Chrome.
I will. While you're over there fumbling with that, I will point out that of the ships over here that we have, like in the little backdrop here, Satanga, aka Mike, is running the Leo over there.
Yo, that was my idea because I figured someone should stand up for Leo, which I had gotten the impression was actually kind of snubbed by fans of the series, and for some reason, shoot 'em up fans in general. But looking into it recently, no, it actually does seem quite well regarded. Although it, I imagine, is nonetheless controversial to an extent among series diehards and/or purists because it allows you to spawn right where you die. Shock!
And then the big thing.
Blasphemy!
Yeah, that's not the issue that I take with it. I take with the issue with the fact
Yeah.
that it does not have a wave cannon. As far as I can tell, it does not have a force device either, because it has a different gimmick.
Yep.
Yes, that is true.
It's a pretty
Which
neat
I
gimmick.
can understand if that. I can understand if that is a deal breaker, but I appreciate the mechanics being different for just at least one side entry, if nothing else.
Like, I don't take issue with it conceptually. It's just not what I think of when I think R-Type. You know, I think,
Right.
big charge gun. I think force device for, tactical maneuvering and, shielding and that kind of thing. And what Leo has instead, it goes all in on the bits with having like Leo bits that basically operate as two force devices that sit at your flanks, and when you tell them to go, they go. They go homing and just like collide with everything. And then like instead of having a charge meter, instead you need to let the Leo bits recover while being adjacent to your ships. You can't really just like leave them hanging out there because they're not really going to accomplish anything. Or at least that was my interpretation, because I got to play it for 10 minutes today before we got started.
I had only played it
that-
just
that-
a little bit
That's
myself.
a pretty solid take.
Yeah. Before we started deciding the doing this as a stream, I had played it maybe once or twice in emulation and just said, no, well, I'll get back to it at some point. I finally decided to do that. I was able to just credit feed and blow through it in a half hour. So
That's how I played through it.
it's not difficult if you have unlimited credits.
One thing that I did find interesting about the Leo bits, that conceptually I understand why they did it. I don't know if there's a control that I didn't know about that prevents this from happening, but the Leo bits will aim inversely proportional to the x-axis maneuver you go on. So if you go to the left, aka go backwards, they will fire forwards. If you go forwards, they'll turn around and fire backwards. So they'll still kind of achieve the same thing that force device manipulation would allow you to do to, cover your backside if there's enemies coming up behind you. And they do it in kind of a naturalistic way where it's like, okay, there's things coming from behind. I want to move forward to keep ahead of them. And and that also lets you fire behind them at the same time. Conceptually, it makes a lot of sense, but I also found that resulted in me kind of not feeling comfortable about wanting to go forward and keep my guns forward. Which is something that I do a lot in more classic R-Type, because I would chase a big wave cannon shot because, well, there's not anything going to be in front of me.
Well, that's actually pretty funny what I was saying earlier, talking about the first R-Type, about how tricky in the heat of the moment it can be to have to fire off your force and reattach yourself to this opposite direction. Leo, that's not a problem whatsoever, and I actually found myself getting quite used to this operation of being much faster able to turn your firing on the dime. I actually sort of felt that mechanic felt like it had a little bit more in common with Over Horizon and Steel Empire, where you can just dead-ass fire forwards and backwards at will.
I have a question for you.
What's up?
Is there a button that allows you to lock your gun angle while you hold it or as a toggle or something. So it's like, okay, hold this button, you go forward, but your guns are still facing forward. Is there a toggle for that I missed, or is that just not a mechanic?
I want to say it's not a
I don't recall
mechanic,
seeing
but
one.
if you give me a minute, I could actually check. Well, while you guys
Also,
go ahead and talk.
Because like I feel that would solve a lot of my issues with that end of things.
now something
If that
else,
were the case.
if I recall correctly, in Image Fight, the little option gun pods you can get also do the same thing. Like you go one way, they fire the direction that you're moving away from.
The red pods do.
Yes. So
Good.
might have been a holdover from that.
Well, I was actually going to mention that, Dyer, that I think a lot of the systems that exist in Leo were carried over from Image Fight. That the pods, and like you said, the way that they kind of aim inversely to the direction that you're moving your ship is definitely something that was in Image Fight as well. Plus, Image Fight also had the ability, it didn't have like a charge shot or anything like that, but you could use your bits offensively to kind of fire them out into a bit of a circular arc that could be used offensively before returning back to your ship.
See,
And I think that's kind of an idea that Leo took and ran with as far as the homing, bits, pods, whatever they call them
So
in Leo.
The Leo bits, yeah.
this
Forneia. Sorry, Dyer. Go ahead.
I was going to say this could mean then that R-Type Leo is actually the secret Image Fight sequel.
It could very well be. I am pretty sure it was intended to be something else handled by another company called Nanao, if I'm reading this right, before it got assimilated into being an R-Type spinoff. Notably, also,
Right.
it doesn't have anything to do with the Bydo. Everything that's happening is due to a malfunctioning supercomputer and some sort of giant artificial terrain called Eden, like a giant floating island or something.
So then
Which actually the malfunction biocomputer, that is the plot of Image Fight as well.
So yeah, maybe this is an image fight, as much of an Image Fight spinoff as it is an R-Type spinoff, kind of like the happy medium between them. I wouldn't know. I honestly never got far in Image Fight. I'm not a huge fan. Of
This
one,
is
so.
technically not one of the Bydo missions, but it still has R-Type in the title, so we're talking about it.
Yeah, it is what it is. Also, Forneia, unfortunately, well, for better or worse, I should say, it doesn't seem like there is a way to lock the bit's direction definitively.
That's really unfortunate. Like, I feel like that would do a lot for the game's approachability. Just like have, if not a toggle, then at least like have a gun lock button that locks as long as you're holding it.
Maybe.
Like maybe you just want to keep firing forward at all times, like in more classical stylings, or fire backwards at all times. And it's just like, okay, we'll just like hold the lock button.
Maybe.
And then if I need to change that strategy, I'll just let it go.
Possibly, although to play devil's advocate, it might be the sort of mechanic that you get used to after more playtime. And no offense, but we've only played this for 10 minutes. So.
Oh, absolutely. Like I don't deny that the possibility exists. Just it did not feel intuitively comfortable to me.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I guess it's debatable whether or not this should be considered part of the series, but again, it's got the title, brand recognition or no. I do think, though, that sending out the bits instead as sort of being the replacement for the wave cannon, it also feels like a mechanic that you get in other shoot-'em-ups. The only other ones I can think of right now are Soldier Blade did that whenever you had a red weapon pod. That was its bomb, so to speak. And the Musha, one of the Alesse games, had these little sub-ships that you could send out in various configurations, and one of them was just to home in on enemies. Although that one is usually a bad idea because they made them very suicidal. So,
also, shameless plug right here. Look forward to our compile shooter stream coming up in the future.
Do.
Nice. I was going to say another travesty with Leo is that the TP2 POW armor is omitted, and instead there are just like static boxes that contain the power-ups.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a little lame. I'll give you that.
Yeah, I miss that little jumping power armor.
Just little
Yep.
feet on it give it a lot more character in your conventional container. So.
Yep. Yeah, and the fact that they don't just like cruise through and then just kind of like float away if you do nothing, the fact that they will actually make a point to settle down on a surface and land, stick around, look around, and then like turn around and start flying kind of like away, flying along your heading as opposed to against it. So you have another chance to get the dang thing.
Right.
You know what those POW armors actually remind me of a little bit? Opa Opa from Fantasy Zone.
Yeah, they do kind of have
I
that
can
vibe.
see that.
Holy
Yeah.
shit,
Yep.
you're right. Totally see that now.
Like a robotically armored Opa Opa.
Exactly.
Alternatively, Twinbee.
Yeah, that too.
Anyway, I'm not sure what anyone else here has to say about Leo.
That can go on for a little bit more. I almost want to say this is actually my favorite R-Type game that was in the arcades, but I might get tarred and feathered because the original certainly has a lot of clout and influence, to be sure. But
And not undeservedly either.
Right. But the fact that this game is so much less difficult for someone like me who's grown a lot less patient as he got older, some fucking how. I don't know how that works, but yes. I appreciate having a relatively breezy shoot 'em up that, even if it's not exactly like the rest of the games in its series, it's still, I think, fun to play if I just want something quick to snack on, and it never feels like you're underpowered. It does have some really overall neat level design, even separate from the fact that you respawn right where you die. I still think that this game on its own is mostly a bit easier than other R-types on the whole. It does get a little tricky in the latter stages, as naturally it should, but nothing that I recall really scarred me for life like Sage 7 in the first R-Type, or
The entirety
every
of
stage
R-Type 2?
after the first, except for the first stage, but yes, every stage after the first. So, yeah, I know, call skill issue on me, whatever. I know this is not a very popular stance.
It's far less R-Type than other R-Type entries, and I feel it's closer to other STGs, not only of its time, but just kind of in general, by virtue of not having the force device or the wave cannon, which, that's the distinguishing feature of R-Type. So lacking both of those features kind of by default makes it more like other shooters. So if other shooters are more your thing, then, I can certainly see Leo being something that clicks with someone a little more.
Yeah, let's just say Leo is my third favorite of the series. I can't, in good conscience, call it better than the best of what R-Type itself does, which I feel are reflected in the later two entries we're going to be talking about not too long from here. But what it does for what it is I think just really damn good. Also, it's a gorgeous looking game running on ladder hardware like M91, 92, whatever it was called. And the soundtrack is extremely un-R-typey. In fact, every stage starts with 3, 2, 1, let's go. And it launches into the sort of like a jazzy sort of modern 90s beat.
It makes me think of Viewpoint.
Yeah, Viewpoint on the Neo Geo. I could totally see that. It's a much bouncier game, much less morbid and gloomy than most of the rest of the R-Type series is, and that might also turn some series purists off. Also, I could see that. Leo is weird, but even if it may only be R-Type in name, I just think it's a really damn solid shmup on its own merit. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add is, as far as it not feeling like an R-Type game, it doesn't have like the same kind of bleak, overbearing theme where you're up against unsurmountable odds of the rest of the series.
Yeah.
It does have a more optimistic feel to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's
It feels more
down
like
to-
Tuesday as opposed to Apocalypse Day.
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty much.
and yeah, the soundtrack that you mentioned, that contributes to it too. It's much more upbeat and lively than
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So,
But not to say it's a bad game. It's different.
yes.
Yeah, I do think that it is worth a play, whether you just like shoot 'em ups, regardless of if you're an R-Type fan. So I must say, it is a real shame that it never left the arcades whatsoever. It never got a single port to anything in the existence of forever. So this is why I value emulation, because otherwise we'd never get to play a game like Leo. It would have been lost forever in the public conscience. So
Mm-hmm. I just think it's a
Yeah.
fun little game.
yeah,
So,
that's all I ask.
yep. And so at that point, there were no more arcade R-types. Instead, they moved on to consoles. And now we're going to talk about one of the best shooters ever made for the Super NES.
Oh yes.
Definitely.
I learned
yeah.
their lessons from Super R-Type. And what they
And
came out
how.
with next, oh yeah. What they came out with after that was just nothing short of phenomenal. That, of course,
And that's the ship I am running over here.
Yep.
Here we go.
we're talking
The
about
R90 Ragnarok from R-Type 3, the third Lightning.
Yes.
So, something just clicked in my head. Do you think the title was meant to be a riff on Thunder Force? No, probably not. I don't know.
Admittedly, I don't know why it has the name The Third Lightning other than,
Lightning.
it's just like The Third Bydo War.
It's a slightly dumb subtitle, but it is what it is.
Well, at least it's not Quest for the Dark Star.
Lightning Force
Yeah.
is spelled. Yeah.
It's like, come on, Sega. But we're not talking Technosoft
It
shooters
could be
yet.
the sequel to Myst.
Oh, Jesus. HG101's favorite game to dump on.
I'm not even dunking on Riven. I'm just saying as a subtitle, the sequel to Myst is a very, very weak one.
Subtitles in the 90s are practically an art all themselves. There were some bizarre and hilarious and stupid ones from that era.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's certainly
Electric
that subtitle is certainly a work of art. I tell you what.
I'm not sure if they ever approached Mobile Light Force levels, though.
That was a mistake.
Was it ever? But yeah, R-Type 3.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
I
Yes.
went back and forth on this one for a while. Like when I first played it way back when, I thought it was too slow. And then I didn't play it again for a long time. Then someone recommended I pick it back up, so I did, back when it was cheap. And it's like, okay, maybe it's not exactly what I was thinking. Okay, I'm enjoying this more now. So, but, for a while, I was just, I would see copies of it out in the wild and be like, yeah, R-Type 3, yeah, it was a decent game, I guess, but, yeah. And, when I finally did pick it back up, it just clicked with me at that point. And the improvements they made, you know what, Forneia, you can take point on this because I know you love talking about it.
Go ahead.
So, everything that I said about R-Type 1 and how they get a lot of things right by having just like your base ship is actually quite competent on its own and everything else is kind of just like built on top of that. They do that again with the R90 Ragnarok having a wave cannon that can be overcharged, and it doesn't do the dispersion wave cannon. Instead, you just get this like really, really large wave cannon shot that is so mighty in its dimensions that it actually gets things a little bit behind you. it completely engulfs the ship and will just like wipe out like a third of the horizontal field in front of you. Just complete and utter devastation, and it pierces everything. Nothing can stop it. It just keeps going. And once again, the level design is built with this consideration, and there are obstacles that where it's like, okay, there's here you have this wall. The thing to destroy so that this wall goes away is on the other side of the wall. You know what you need to do, or else you have a problem.
Just a little bit of a side note there. I remember way back in the day there was this shooter website called Starbase 299. Their banner image was actually the Ragnarok firing that giant mega wave cannon shot.
It's a cool sprite. It's just like, wow, this came from my ship? Somehow that seems even more amazing than the dispersion shot from 2. I don't know how, but
it's far more controllable than the dispersion wave cannon, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, you do have an alternate charge shot.
Yes, and
it's wildly impractical, but I like it nonetheless.
Oh no! It's got its uses. It has its uses. Oh boy, howdy!
It takes practice to use it right, but
I will give you that one.
Really
I will give you that one. There is some understanding necessary to use the hyper wave cannon properly. And this is why I knew it wasn't the hyperwave cannon in 2, because that's here.
Right.
Yep.
So the hyperwave cannon takes a bit of a different approach to the wave cannon formula. You build meter, and instead of building up for a charge shot, instead you basically need to charge for the same duration that you would for, like the really big shot. So you have to basically charge the meter twice in the amount of time, but it's just once for this visually. And when it's full, you get this, very distinct, your shot is ready pulsing noise. And when you release it, you have like these like 6 or 8, I don't remember exactly, wads of pure energy that just kind of fire forward in an arc in front of you, kind of like the dispersion wave cannon would, but then they come back, and now you auto fire wave cannon shots for 10 seconds and unleash complete and utter devastation in front of you. The downside, once you are done, the Ragnarok goes into a cooldown phase and cannot use the wave cannon. You can use your basic shot, you can use your lasers, but you cannot charge the wave cannon until that cooldown period has elapsed. And it is, I think, 15 seconds. It's a fair amount of time, so you need to weigh its usage very carefully. You cannot use it willy-nilly, but if you use it properly, it just devastates. It's amazing. And the change is don't stop there, because now you have 3 force devices to choose from at the start of the game.
Yep.
And all of them have different lasers and have different sub-functions. So you can play the classic way with the round force, which is the one that, if you play the original R-Type, it's the classic, you know it, you love it, you know what it does, you know what it's capable of, and it'll get the job done. This is kind of the classic/hard mode of the force devices available in R-Type 3. The second one is the Shadow Force, which rapidly deploys and recalls when you manipulate it. It moves it basically has like rocket pods on it, more or less, that just makes like and its force lasers are a little weird. I actually use this one the least of the 3. I'm not that big of a fan of it. But it does some stuff about leaving shadows behind that will continue to fire lasers of their own accord. And like I said, I don't actually use it that much. I forget exactly how the lasers work for that one. The real winner. The real winner, though, is the Cyclone Force, which is the third option.
My Sterling boy.
The blobby one.
The new prototype Force device. And yes, it is like this blobby liquid orb with, like energy cores inside of it. And much like how, the round force will visually change, and that's a thing that does not change over the series. Like, as you upgrade the force device, it visually changes to reflect this. The Cyclone Force is kind of like this metal thing with like some like goo on the outer edges, and as you upgrade it, it gets increasingly more and more goo until it is just like an orb of murder goo, and it is great.
It is a lot more blatantly alien than the classic Force, pretty amazingly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it is particularly special among Force devices because it doesn't just go and come back. You can toggle that while it is mid-flight and thus actually control it and have it just hang around in a given area, which is great because its particular specialty is it does heightened damage from its contact, and it has a large contact zone the more you upgrade it. It is called the Cyclone Force because it lets out two little thingies that will spin rapidly around the Force, basically becoming a whirling goo tornado wherever it is, and it just pummels whatever is in front of you. It does not shoot anything when detached, but it kind of doesn't need to when it just destroys everything itself, and you have borderline complete control over it.
Yeah, and not to mention, on top of that, I do think that the blue laser, the blue power-up option you get from this, basically gives you, like, the spread gun laser, not too far off from Contra.
The Cyclone's force lasers are very mighty in their own way. The red laser, its own interpretation of the anti-air laser, is not as visually impressive, and I don't think it does as much damage as the classic round forces anti-air laser does. But what it does do is it actually pierces obstacles. It will the projectiles will shrink as they pass through an obstacle, so they don't just like keep going like the big wave cannon shot does, but they will pierce through surfaces. So you can get some things that are like hiding behind shields or taking cover behind a wall or something like that, and still getting them well enough without having to stop to resort to the big wave cannon shot. As you say, the blue laser is kind of just like a shotgun laser, but not the actual shotgun laser.
Yeah. Ironically enough, but yeah, it's really potent, and the yellow one like causes these like deploys these like little mid-air, I don't know, pods or whatever that rapidly shoot
and energy orbs. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe not as diverse in direction as the other yellow option, but it still is a really strong.
Yeah, they'll fire forward unless they detect something off to the sides, in which case they will deviate off course and go hit things over there. Or am I conflating that with the Shadow Force? I think that might be the Shadow Force.
Shadow Force, actually. Yeah. I wish I played more with the Shadow Force. I'm going to be completely honest.
The Shadow Force is kind of tough to use because
it is more
its forces aren't as simplistically usable as the round forces, but they're also not quite as devastating as the Cyclone Forces.
Yeah, I know one of them like actually
they're more technical.
Actually moves its positioning depending on how you move your ship, and it has something close to like full 360 aim if you know how to use it right. I forget which color that was, though. I can definitely see the uses of the Shadow Force, even if it is a bit more, esoteric. And, the classic is the classic. It's still as effective as it is, but I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty sure every time I beat this game, I always use the Cyclone Force. It's easy mode. It's busted. It is almost too dominatingly good, which I almost want to say is sort of I don't want to call it a negative necessarily of R-Type 3, but when we go to talk about R-Type Delta, I will say with that one, I was actually motivated to beat that one with all three of its different options because I felt that neither ship was necessarily more powerful than the other. In this game, if you don't choose the Cyclone Force, you kind of feel like you're handicapping yourself.
I don't know if I would say handicapping yourself. I feel like it's kind of more like I won't even say like the Cyclone Force is a crutch necessarily, because you do kind of have to figure out good points to let the Force do the work versus you doing the work.
Oh no,
it's just easier to kind of figure out that kind of kinetic relationship, since what it does in and of itself is incredibly simple.
Yes, exactly. That being said, even if the Cyclone Force is arguably more powerful than the other forces, you're right, by no means makes the games necessarily easier. Positioning of the Force, knowing when and where to deploy it, is still very much R-Type 3's bread and butter. It also has 6 stages like R-Type 2, but for the most part, it's not a pushover of a game, certainly. It does get pretty tough even as soon after the first stage. Right. But like R-Type 2, but less immediately face-stabbingly evil. It has more gentle. For the most part, curve. Yeah, for the most part, it has a much fairer and consistent difficulty curve, with one very notable exception that I will unfortunately have to take points away from. But I'll get to that.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Oh yeah, no, everyone knows it. Everybody knows it's true. I don't want to get to that just yet because I think Warren had more things to say.
Basically, what I think it boils down to is R-Type 3 is everything that was good about R-Type 1, but more and better for the most part.
Yes.
And that's why R-Type 3 is just like such a strong entry, and why I picked the Ragnarok as my representation for the little image back there. It was the first thing I thought of.
On top of that, it's one of the coolest looking models of the ship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like the little red fins at the back. Mm-hmm. Very, very stylish.
Yeah.
I was going to say, outside of some of the later ships that you can unlock in Final, I also believe that the Ragnarok is like the strongest fighter in kind of the core series.
Yeah, I don't think they ever I know as far as like gameplay mechanics, outside of the Ragnarok 2 in Final, nothing is stronger than the Ragnarok.
Right.
And the Ragnarok 2 cheats.
Yeah.
Here, let's just give you a wave cannon that you charge forever, and then it destroys forever. It basically is the wave motion gun.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, was that the first ship that had the final wave cannon?
It's the one that allows you to use that over the course of the whole game, as opposed to the cinema moment.
Right. But yeah, the 7
It's
levels
basically the
charge.
supersonic of the R9 series.
Yeah, that was I loved melting bosses with just one shot.
Nice.
But yeah.
Now, as far as some of the stuff that happens in R-Type 3, there's some really neat effects they pull off, like that rotating thing in the first stage in the background.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I've always been a fan of that moment when you have one of those giant mechs who flies up in front of you, he's getting ready to take a shot, and also
Gaines.
Wall.
Yeah. Gaines shows up and then realizes they have a problem. Smash.
Uh-oh. I love that there's the animation of it, taking a moment to look behind itself, and then, but right before it slams into the wall.
And you're going through this tube, or rather these multiple huge slats of metal. And it turns around, realizes it has a problem, smashes into one of them, and that one stops. The top one is still screaming by you.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It is not only a cool effect, but also a rare moment of comedy in a normally dour series. Whoever programmed in the idea for the red robot to just look behind it for a split second before it just completely explodes, give them a goddamn bonus.
It's such a good moment, because it's okay, Gains, the enemy type, is in the first level of the original R-type, so it's like, okay, here's the new Gains.
That's right.
You go through 2 of those, and then you get the red one, which is a Shar Aznable reference from Gundam.
You know what? You're right.
And that one you can't destroy, but it crashes, so it solves its own problem. It's great.
I'm trying to think of this is no Zaku joke, but it's not coming to me. So I know.
Well, it's not Gains anymore. Now it's just a rack.
It's just scrap iron.
Also, speaking of visual spectacles, like we were talking about the launch sequence in R-Type 2, the launch sequence in R-Type 3, it's not really a launch sequence. Instead, it's just like has the camera on like this core of energy while this like ambient pulsing plays, and it fades out scale after scale after scale to a series of guitar riffs and reveals that it's the R9 Ragnarok core. And you just see layers and layers and layers of the ship until you're out in field view and transitions seamlessly into the gameplay. It's so good.
Yes,
I love so good. Yes.
Yeah, the first stage really puts its best foot forward with the graphics.
It so does.
Arguably to the extent that the graphics in the later stages might not feel like they don't quite put in as much effort, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. I appreciate that they went for the upfront spectacle before they sort of toned it down a little, because it's like, the first stage just has like sort of a fuck yeah, we're in space, we're blowing shit up sort of feel to it. Then immediately it transitions into stage 2 where the music and the setting's a lot creepier and acid droplets are constantly eating away.
Yeah, now you're in danger.
Rain.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Before we move on to that, I do want to bring up one thing.
Sure.
Regarding the pullback from the interior of the Arrowhead's core.
Ragnarok, yeah.
It reminds me actually a lot of the opening for Star Trek First Contact. Where it's like, it starts off with, the credits and all that, and it's like they're zooming off into the distance, but the camera's actually pulling back, and it comes out of Picard's eye, and it just keeps going back. You see he's in a Borg alcove, and then it just keeps going and going and going. You just see the inside of the Borg cube and all that, and it's just... I remember seeing that. I said, wow, it's like the opening R-Type 3 in a way, with the way they did that.
That's neat. Also, another thing about R-Type 3 I just want to throw out, because I mentioned guitar riffs. I think this has the R-Type 3 is the R-Type with the most electric guitar per capita.
Yeah.
I can't argue with that.
It has the heavy metal soundtrack.
It does.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It does feel more metal than the rest of the series.
R-Type 3 makes me a very, very excitable mermaid.
It's like R-Type 3 is the metal compared to Leo's laid-back jazz.
Yeah. And, speaking of the opening, even before that, when you first start up the game, there's just a real kind of driving rock that quickly turns into like an insane guitar solo as you're selecting which force you're going to take into battle.
Yeah, and it's first person inside cockpit view. Right. It is you looking over your options as you are taking off. Like that's like the actual like launch sequence, but you're still like already mid-launch, so it doesn't count.
You know what that reminds me of?
And that's like one of the best tracks in the game.
That's like when Milhouse is really impressed, is like blown away by Bone Storm, and all he did was just enter his name.
Thrill-Ho.
R-Type 3 is the Thrill-Ho of the series.
But yeah, I was going to say that, there's the Starfield just screaming by as you're going through the menu there. And then it transitions from that to the core shot that, goes out. As you're seeing the Ragnarok just screaming through space and then slowing down to, cruising speed or whatever.
The combat speed, yeah.
Yeah, as you take control of the ship. Yeah, it's perfection.
I still try to think of games that have, more just, hooking openings than that, because it's not something that takes a lot of time to do. Like you unless you intentionally drag out the 4 selection for the sake of listening to the music, that whole sequence takes like 8 seconds tops.
Right.
And then you have the core view thing, which lasts about like 5 or 6 or something like that. And then you're just in the action and you're already amped up to go.
The other game that I will compare as far as having a great opening like that is Blaster Master on NES, where you start the game and there's a shot from behind the Sophia 3, and the
Sophia
music.
the Third,
Sophia the Third, the music builds up, and then you see like the rockets kind of blast. Exactly.
And they say you can't hear pictures.
Exactly.
Incidentally, I'm going to take this opportunity to once again plug the Blaster Master Zero trilogy, because they are the best.
They're really damn good, yeah.
They're so good.
3. I still have to get to 3. I know. I'll do that.
Oh, hurry up! That's the best one.
I'm glad the series gets better as it goes on, though.
It really does. It really does. Hurry up! What are you waiting for? Stop talking and go do it now.
After I beat Like a Dragon Kurohyo 2, I will get to Blaster Master 03.
It can wait.
You can do it, Mike. All right, now we've
only played the first one.
This isn't about me playing Blaster Master 03. It's about why R-Type 3 is awesome. Okay.
So, now, speaking of which, we've been spending.
We'll show you the power of being the 3rd strongest.
Oh, okay.
All right, we spent plenty of time singing R-Type 3's praises here. Let's talk about the part that Mike hates.
I wanted to sing a few more praises before I get to that, because I don't think I talked up the level design enough, because it feels like every level is doing something very different. Like, I've never seen such a great... I not often in a shoot 'em up, though, I see such a great synergy of what the player does versus what the level's trying to do against it. Like, everything that we mentioned in the first stage, the second stage being eaten away by acid droplets, the third level, for the first time in the series, having vertical movement in it, which can be pretty tricky but manageable to deal with. A later stage having parts... what seemingly innocuous background blocks morph into enemies, which is such a cool effect. And, of course, the last stage is very technicolor and has all these floating portals that you need to get through. For the most part, this is some just astounding stage design, and I mostly love it.
Now, I do want to bring up...
It's super eye candy. Also, the boss of the 5th stage is my favorite boss in the whole series.
Oh, yes.
It's so good.
I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, there's some damn good bosses in this game. Like, the first
what
one
it is, what it does, and the music that kicks in when you're fighting it. Oh boy. Yeah, there's some really cool bosses, like even just the first one with that pod firing at you from the background, the giant enemy crab, weak point, massive damage memes from the 2000s. The second boss fires a lot of sperm at you.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that, actually, the censorship.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob. Yes.
Yeah, in the Super Famicom original, those are pretty literally sperm. Giant sperm.
Right?
Not even trying to hide it. Yes.
Nope. Yet Nintendo America obviously took offense to that and had them change it to eyeballs with wriggly tails.
Which I don't think is a downgrade, honestly.
If anything, it's a little creepier.
I was going to say, if anything, it's like now there's sperm with giant eyes.
Yeah. All the better to
I guess they're
fertilize
speaking
with.
now.
Dyer, Rob, I'm actually going to give you this one, because, I don't know, just something about how you said that rubbed me the wrong way.
Fertilize.
No, don't do that again.
Fertilize.
Enough.
Fertilizer. You can buy it in any garden department.
Oh boy.
Works good for plants. Fertilizer.
Okay, let's hear it for fertilizer and move the fuck on already.
I thought. See, here's the thing. It's not that part about the second boss that I thought you were going to take umbrage with, but more the shape of the boss itself, and considering your relationship to it.
Well, it is firing the sperm out of a lot of holes. Yes, this is true.
Well, no, not that part. Think a little the other way.
I'm not sure what you're getting at. I'm sorry.
Now, this is the stage 2 boss you're talking about, right?
Yes.
I would say we get that boss together.
The one with the sweet spot that's kind of hard to hit inside the big fleshy cavern.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
you mean its eyeball is a vagina?
I was just going to suggest we get the original Japanese version together with the stage 2 boss of the original and see what happens.
Oh, boy.
It would become triple X type at that point.
I don't want to see
Bydo
what
Princess
in that union.
All right, this is getting a little vulgar. Let's move on.
See, this is the guy who swears up a storm every chance he gets.
I know, but there's a difference between that and the...
I'm not even being vulgar. I'm just letting you all fill in the blanks.
I mean, it's right there on display. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yell at Ira, Mike.
Oh, go get you guys. I'm trying to talk about this game that I love. And doing a bad job of it, apparently. So, before we get any more sidetracked than we already have, I will say, I think R-Type 3 is my favorite game in the series. Yeah. Honestly, the next one that we're going to talk about might also qualify for that, but I will say that call skill issue in me, if you will, but for most of R-Type 3's run, it is challenging without being too crushing, I feel. It is... Mm-hmm. It feels like IRM really learned their mistakes from R-Type 2, and they also realized that maybe we want to sell console games that are more palatable for audiences that can more easily get into it. So R-Type 3 does maybe feel a little less insane than the prior two numbered games, but I still think it's definitely a challenge, and you feel well earned for beating it. But for the most part, I think it just being a little bit easier goes a long way, and for someone like me who is less patient than he used to be, like I said, I appreciate that it feels like that I can beat this one in any reasonable capacity whenever I play it. That being said, there is a notably bizarre and massively bullshit difficulty spike in the second half of Stage 4.
Glad I got my popcorn.
I was going to say, for all the praising of R-Type 3's stage design, I knew that there was one omission that you had there.
Yeah. Like, let me be clear. The front half of Stage 4 is really neat.
Oh yeah, with the what keeps happening throughout that part is that this little green circle pops up. Obvious visual indicator for you to hike your butt over there, because then these giant mechanical presses just set in, and the entire screen is just now obscured. And if you didn't move to this green circle, you will be crushed. So that is a really cool screen.
Insert safe spot here.
Yes, it is neat. And then, like, the stage seems like it's reasonable as you get to a somewhat sort of gradius-looking section with, like, turrets and this large three-armed spinny thingy and whatnot. I don't know how better to call it. But then we get to the Molten Maze. The Molten Maze.
I've been waiting for this.
This motherfucker is almost as bad, if not worse, than most of what R-Type 2 throws at you. I hate to say it. Okay, maybe that's a little too far to say, but it is, I think, roughly on par with some of the mean bullshit that game pulls on you. It is at least equivalent to the latter half of Stage 7 in the original R-Type, if not worse in some ways.
So I am actually prepared to come to this area's defense to a point.
To a point. That's fair. Okay. Go ahead.
The first pass through it, you can read the whole situation, logically conclude where the safe spots are, and position yourself accordingly. With the added bonus of there being a ton of POW units just floating around. And even if you ate a death before going into this, you will be fully powered by the time you come out of it.
Absolutely. I should also maybe go into a little bit further context. The premise of the Molten Maze is that it is a slow-moving section, fairly claustrophobic, that has, like, several, just, like, floating platforms, let's say, sort of organized in, like, 3 tiers, high, middle, and low. And at the top of the screen are these, like, molten steel deposits that dump
spigots.
Spigots that dump these large glowing reddish pink they kind of look like lasers, but like they have these frayed edges to them. I'm pretty sure they're supposed to be like molten steel because like the background looks like a factory, a foundry or whatever, and it's also pouring,
a foundry, yes.
Yeah, hot red liquid as it were, and these spigots just keep dumping lava. I keep wanting to say lava, but that's not right if it's not natural. So, it dumps these molten steel lasery thingies constantly, and they travel quickly, and they flow down the maze-like structure of this area rather specifically. And in the gaps between the 3 tiers of the maze, there are these asshole little gates that close and very abruptly divert the pathway of the molten lasers. So, that is a rare moment in this game where I do think that... I actually think that, like, the trial and error aspect, for the most part, is somewhat reduced in 3 compared to the first 2 games. But this part is absolutely trial and error, especially if those little switchgate bullshitters.
Here's the thing. You can look at the magma like once, and you do get to do that once for free before you're actually thrown into it. It does work under a logic. It will proceed forward until it hits a hole, in which case it will go down the hole and continue to proceed unless it hits a wall or a gate, in which case it will change its course, but it will always go down. So you can always count on being above it if there is, a hole in front of you, or being ahead of it if there is a hole behind you. And you can always rely on those as safe spaces, and you can, internalize that. The kick about the doors is that they will switch mid-flow, and that can trip you up if you're not expecting it. But you shouldn't be relying on those spots that don't have the holes for guaranteed safety anyway in the first place.
Right. I do feel that those damn switch doors... Again, I do agree there's a consistent logic to the pathway of the molten refuse, and it does give you a little bit of advance warning, but
and it is worth noting that the distribution of the molten metal is static. You will always have the same safe spots. So if worse comes to worse, you can just memorize your way through it, but it is not necessary to do so.
That being said, I do think it is the most trial and error part in the game, bar none.
I can give you that, yeah.
That is why I'm personally not the biggest fan of this section, because...
the big problem is after you clear the mid-boss and you have to go through it backwards.
That is something that not even R-Type 2 did, and that's why I'm like, oh, fuck you! You assholes knew this was the worst part in the game, and you had to make us do it twice! You fucking dickwads! Why? Why?
In fairness, they don't make you go through the whole thing, if I recall correctly.
No,
I think
they
you do. Is it? I thought you divert downways halfway through. Maybe I'm missing
the part where you divert is after the 3-armed machine, but it is completely after the molten maze. So you do have to do the entire thing. It's like they expect you to be Ginger Rogers, aka everything Fred Astaire does, but backwards and in heels. So I'm not as talented as Miss Rogers was. Call skill issue on me if you will, but. This was hard enough to do in the first place. That you have to make me do it a second time, and I mean, it's not the reverse part so much that ticks me off because, of course, you have the Force being what it is, able to fire backwards. It's just the sheer cheek of the developers, like, knowingly trolling you at this point. I will say, for as angry as I am, I sort of respect how legitimately trollish it is. Like, it feels like the game is just grinning at you and just, dangling its ball sack, so to speak.
So then,
the most metaphorical way possible.
Then what's worse, that or Holy Diver?
Holy Diver is worse. This is just one relatively evil part. Holy Diver is just evil. Holy Diver is the R-Type 2 of platformers on the NES.
Yeah, there you go.
Holy Diver likes to eat your inputs.
It's a mean game, but we're not talking about that one. The thing of it is, I don't dislike the Molten Maze per se. I do think it is a rather interesting gimmick, and it is certainly a unique gimmick.
I think it's the first time in the series where you actually do go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. Again, R-Type 2
left.
never made the first two R-Types never made you do that. That they do this for this part. It's just I wouldn't mind.
I do conceptually think it's very, very funny that you get to like the mid boss and go, all right, the way to the actual boss is open. We need to put the ship in reverse.
Yeah. The actual boss of that stage,
because the Ragnarok does not turn around.
The actual boss of that stage is pretty neat. It's like this large floating spiky ship that has these like three circular thingies going on rails in the background, and then the background keeps spinning, and then you have to dodge these things on the rails while the ship is also shooting at you. It's a pretty tough and tricky and cool boss, but I do think that it is easier than the Molten Maze was. However, if you blow it at this boss, then you do have to... I forget, is there a checkpoint at the backwards part of the Molten Maze after the mid-boss?
I think there's a checkpoint between that and the boss.
Okay, that is at least a fair amenity. I will give it that. See, I don't dislike the Molten Maze per se. I do think it is an innovative and interesting part, even if it is the most, I think, brutally old-school section of the game. My gripe is that A, you have to do it twice over, which is just the developers being assholes, and B, this is in stage 4. The last 2 levels are comparatively not so bad compared to the Molten Maze, in my humble opinion. Your mileage may vary, but I just think it's weird. If this was in the final stage, I actually would have had less complaints about it, but it's such this bizarre difficulty spike that the game never again reaches up to, and I'm just kind of like, if this was the penultimate stage even, I'd be cooler with it, but 2/3 of the way in, something about that, it just feels off somehow.
It is worth noting that while you're navigating the maze, there are very few actual threats other than the liquid metal. Yeah. Like, there's a few turrets that are like embedded in like the actual structure of the maze itself, but they are static and easily destroyed. Like you see yourself going in reverse. There's no question that you put the force on the backside of your ship. Yeah. Like, if you don't, then you are actively handicapping yourself on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
and you will easily solve any threat that they provide to you. It is genuinely just the maze and the liquid and the navigation thereof that you have to concern yourself with.
And Forneia, I think you've made several good points that maybe it's not like the worst.
Like I said, I'm willing to defend it to a point. I don't think it's completely unreasonable. I do think it's too much.
Yes, and too much and too soon. Again, if this was in the last 2 stages, I
don't know. I kind of like that it's here and not in the final level, because do you want to have to do all of that then fight the final boss?
The final boss can be pretty tricky, yes. The final boss of this game is really cool,
Let's put it this way. Do you want to get to like right near the end of the level and then into the end of the game and then lose your continues?
Ooh. That's a very Gradius 3 move when you put it that way.
So at least you're only like past the halfway point. It's like, okay, it runs over. Hang on.
And it's maybe a and the stage 5 boss is also a marathon boss, so to speak. So, you know what? That is a good point. But nonetheless, all of that said, this is still my least favorite part in the game. Call it a skill issue, if you will, but just because it's the most frustrating part, I consider it, like, basically the only blemish in what I consider a nigh-perfect game. I know it seems like a Bush move to, like, dock points off for just one part of the game, but Dyer knows what I mean when I say Tetris chamber, so this isn't the only situation of... This isn't the only instance of this happening in a game I otherwise
Are you making
love.
an I Want to Be the Guy reference with that?
No. This is referring to a really... This is referring to a terrible part in Castlevania 3, actually.
And Gradius 3 Arcade as well.
Okay, Gradius 3 Arcade is just fucking mean all around. It's just that the Tetris cube, the cube barrage alone is just like a nightmare piled on top of what's already a goddamn wasteland of hell, so... yes, Texark knows what I'm talking about, yes.
Yep. Okay, guys.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there unlimited continues in R-Type 3?
Actually, yeah, that's another
There
point.
are. I was more like speaking conceptually, or if you're doing something like I like to do, I like to limit myself to 2 because that's what the Master System port of R-Type 1 issues you.
Yeah.
So, except for the Molten Maze, R-Type 3 is otherwise, I think, the fairest slash most accommodating of the R-Types, and I might be a wuss, but I think that's a large part of why it's my favorite entry in the series. But just besides that, it just has really good level design.
It gives you
aesthetics.
good tools to match the challenges it presents you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's just a very smart game on the whole.
Yes.
It's allowed to be a little bit of a troll at some point, but aside from that, I just think it's tops and just one of the best shoot-'em-ups of the 16-bit era.
You can't deny it. It's one little, sadistic murder as a treat,
Yep.
I'll give you that. I'd focused way too much in this one part. Sorry, Ron.
Okay, guys. Before you go on, Jim, just in interest of time and whatnot, we're going to try and speed things up a little from here. So, that's it. Jim, go ahead and say what you had to say.
I was going to say, I know we're going to get to but there were some DLC stages that were kind of remixes of earlier R-Type stages, and the Molten Maze was one of those.
Oh no!
And they actually throw the player a bone a bit there, because they highlight the paths that the molten metal will take before it actually takes that path.
Holy shit! If the original game had done that, I wouldn't have spent like 20 minutes just having a flashback about it.
Yeah.
Shit.
All right.
That is actually pretty cool, yeah.
Now, I do want to briefly touch on the Game Boy Advance port.
Oh, boy.
It existed.
Yeah, I've heard it's terrible.
Okay, well, then it's good I forgot. I guess.
I've never played it.
I've not played it, but what I understand about it is that a third-party developer was told to port the game to the GBA and was provided with no assets or guidance or anything whatsoever. They were just told, do this. So they basically had to rip the SNES ROM and try to reassemble things in by hand with no guidance or structure.
Ouch.
Oh, wow. This first stage music is terrible. This is a bad remix. My God.
So that sounds pretty much like any of the various Chinese bootleg reverse engineered games.
Yeah.
Welcome
to world and
a game.
The hitboxes do not line up. Like your wave cannon will pass right through things and not do damage. Things that should not hit you do, and so on and so forth. This is what I understand to be the case. I have not played it myself because I don't hate myself.
Yeah.
It's with these organ samples. My God.
I was going to say, as big a fan as I am of R-Type 3, I think I would have been incredibly disappointed then if I had bought this on GBA back in the day.
Boy.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, after R-Type 3 was released for the Super NES, for a long time, nothing happened.
Alas.
And then,
very unfortunate.
All of a sudden, we got R-Types, and that led right into the first PlayStation exclusive R-Type game, R-Type Delta. And Jim, I saw you stream this recently, so I want to I want to have you go take the point on this one.
Okay. You'll have to. I haven't really played it.
Okay. As much as I love R-Type 3, I think Delta just barely edges it out as my favorite. There are some new mechanics in the game to kind of set itself apart. First of all, there are 3 different ships that you can pilot this time. Because similarly to R-Type 3, where there were the 3 different force options, in R-Type Delta this time, each ship behaves a bit differently, in addition to its forces being quite a bit different. There is the R9A2 Delta, which is a enhanced version of the R9 from the original R-Type. Chronologically, Delta actually takes place after the events of the first R-Type and before R-Type 2.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
It's an interquel.
Yeah. Huh. So the Delta has the standard wave cannon and also the standard round force. So it's pretty much, your vanilla setup that, you would have been used to, if you've been a longtime fan of the series. The additional mechanic, though, that is shared by all 3 ships that you can choose, though, is... now, I don't remember the exact name of it, but I'm going to call it the DOS system.
That sounds familiar. I think you might be on track with that.
Okay, but anyway, it is a mechanic that there is a meter that starts at 0, and as your force absorbs projectiles and makes contact with enemies, this meter will begin to build. And at full dose, 100% charge, you can press the triangle button to unleash a screen-wide delta attack that just acts kind of like smart bombs would in other STGs. And something that I'll get into later, it actually becomes part of the mechanic to fight the final boss of Delta.
Oh, yeah.
The other ships are the RX Albatross, which has the tentacle force. And this is the one that I'm the least familiar with. I don't really or how it operates. First of all, the force itself, when it is detached from your ship, it kind of goes on autopilot and will search out enemies for you. And just whatever happens to be close by, it will slowly kind of... It almost looks like it's making a swimming motion in the direction of those enemies. And its shots are not like locked to a horizontal. It will actually, shoot in the direction of those enemies. So, that can be helpful. The force itself will also open and close kind of inversely to how you move back and forth.
Hey,
and when...
That makes it a little bit Leo-ish. Kinda, sorta.
Yeah, kinda, sorta. But it's actually closer to how things work in X Multiply.
Yes, exactly.
Right, which it's called the tentacle force. So I'm sure it's, directly inspired by how X Multiply does things.
Mm-hmm.
And when the force is open, it actually acts as a larger hitbox to absorb enemy shots and all, too. The red laser with the tentacle force will shoot smaller lasers from the top and bottom of the okay, no, I'm mistaken. I think that's the blue laser.
Yeah, no, that's the blue one. The blue one is directionally guided lasers, as I recall.
Right. And I believe the blue ones will kind of home in on their target also.
Yeah, there's some auto aim on them, right?
Yeah. And then the red laser will shoot either a thin concentrated beam or a wider beam based on whether the force is opened or closed.
That effect is really freaking cool, in my opinion.
It is cool, yeah. And I forget what the yellow laser.
The yellow one has basically extended energy tentacles protrude from the tips. Shorter range, but pretty powerful if you can manipulate them right.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I'd forgotten that.
And they sort of like have semi-fluid physics to them that make them better for taking, like the yellow weapon usually does, better for taking care of enemies above and below you. I'm not sure if it's harder to use compared to the Cerberus, but I think it does take a little bit more finesse than the standard Delta to do well with the Albatross.
Yeah, in my opinion, the Albatross is the most difficult ship to pilot in Delta, similar to the Shadow Force in R-Type 3.
Although I do like sort of like immediate like shotgun effect that its charge beam has. I read that how it works is like it shoots an invisible force that causes the enemies to explode with energy from within, which is a really cool effect. It's like not penetrating, but it's better for dealing with like groups of enemies in various elevations. So
it's like throwing them in a microwave.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep. So it's wave cannon. Again, I'm not sure the exact name of that one, but yeah, it behaves the way that you described. Kind of almost looks visually like a shotgun blast, but yeah, it explodes in the middle of a group of enemies and will take out a large number of them. And then the last ship is the R-13 Cerberus, which is my favorite ship to use in the game.
It's the coolest looking one by far.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say it's black with red accents, which I think looks cool to begin with.
Yeah.
And it has the anchor force, which its mechanic is that when you deploy the force from the ship, it's deploys very quickly, but it has a chain attached to it also. And if the force collides with an enemy, if that enemy is not immediately destroyed, like most of your popcorn enemies, it will actually latch onto that enemy and continue to do persistent damage to it.
Looking it up from the R Museum from Final, the Albatross's wave cannon is called the shock wave cannon.
Shock wave cannon. Okay.
Cool. That sounds fun.
And the chain that is attached to the anchor force will actually deal small amounts of damage to enemies as well. So
it's an energy chain, basically. It kind of makes up for the fact that it's sort of like the Cyclone Force in 3 in the sense that it doesn't shoot on its own, but it is much more of a blunt force weapon.
Right. Yeah, it is more of a melee weapon.
And it definitely synergizes the best with gaining energy for your dose. So
Right, which is another advantage to using it, is because force usage with the anchor force is all about ramming it into enemies, which has the additional benefit of rapidly gaining dose as well. I also think that just kind of design-wise, it looks really cool because you have these giant kind of claws off the front of the Force that, will literally, like, latch into something.
Yeah.
So just a very aggressive design to it.
Yeah, I think canonically it actually has like more Bydo energy in its design than the other two has.
I believe so.
This actually becomes a plot point, but I don't want to spoil anything. Because the Cerberus has a slightly different ... No, I'm not going to say anything else.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would like to talk about the ending, but yeah, I don't know how we feel about spoilers. So,
well, we're talking about spoilers to a nearly 30-year-old game. So,
on the other hand, it's also a series that, despite being an STG series, actually has a lot of story that is compelling.
Yes,
it really elaborated in the latter games. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, and that's honestly part of the reason that I really got into the series is because of kind of the deep lore that's been built around the series, which I think Delta definitely starts to run with, and then Final just goes nuts.
Oh yeah.
But getting back to the Anchor Force, its lasers. The yellow laser is probably the most interesting of it. The power of the laser is very weak, but it causes like a laser to sweep from below your ship to above your ship, then taking up the entire screen. So smaller enemies is very good for dealing with that, but I don't know. Maybe this is just my play style. I've never found a whole lot of use from the yellow laser weapons in most Force variations.
Neither have I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is basically the double gun in Gradius terms. No one uses it as much.
Yeah.
Right. The red laser just fires a single beam straight forward. But if you move your ship, there is kind of a shadow trail behind that will continue to do some amount of damage.
Also a really cool effect, yes.
Right. And the blue laser will fire two beams forward that will then angle slightly to a new horizontal and then continue straight. So it has somewhat of a homing capacity to it.
Funny enough, that's actually kind of how like the wussy green laser in R-Type 2 was, but it just feels so much better here now.
And then I love the wave cannon that the Cerberus has. It unleashes a chain lightning that will home in on enemies to a slight degree. So if there is like a string of enemies, if you hit the first with the wave cannon, it will chain into the second, into the third, and so on. And it really becomes useful for hitting some enemies that like to hide behind obstacles. You can play with it in such a way to be able to hit those seemingly blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. According to Final, it is the lightning wave cannon.
Okay. I wanted to call it the lightning. I didn't know if that was correct or not.
Mm-hmm. Not to be confused with the third lightning.
Right. But like I said, getting more into spoiler territory. One thing that I love about Delta is that it has somewhat of emergent storytelling. We talked about in R-Type 3, there's a great moment with the Gaines that turns around and then slams into a wall. In Delta, the stage 4 or the fourth contact boss is called the Collector, and after you defeat that boss, you can see in the background that a friendly R9 is released from it that then like flies off into the distance. So I guess you could think of that level as a rescue mission. Later on in the game, in stage 6, you go through a looks like a facility that has been heavily infested by the Bydo. I mean, there's just like organic masses, stuck to the walls everywhere, and things seem like okay. This is just some other Bydo stage.
Ah, another horror tunnel.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's definitely a horror tunnel. Then, at the end of the stage, what has been, just a very claustrophobic stage opens up, and you begin to descend into this large open chamber. And then in the background, you see this column with 4 runways surrounding it. And you realize at this point that this is the stage select area where you chose your ship from the beginning of the game.
That's a really nice touch, yeah.
Yeah. And what you realize is the R9 that you freed in the earlier stage returned to base, but was infected by the Bydo, and it spread its infection to the entire base.
Ooh.
So, in some regards, you are responsible for that. So yeah, that bit of storytelling I thought was great, and I mean it feeds into the whole just bleak narrative of this Bydo just being a never-ending threat to humanity.
Yeah, it's funny. I think Delta actually starts out livelier and, well, maybe not as lively as R-Type 3, but compared to the first 2 games,
right.
The first stage music is like really upbeat and progressive and techno-y, and also this game's soundtrack is fucking amazing, by the way.
Oh, it is.
Like,
yes.
It feels even more dynamic than previous games. Like, it goes into I want to say it's a bit more techno-y. It feels a little bit more like contemporary shmups at the time, but there's a lot of really good stuff. But it gets definitely darker and darker as you head in, and the music in the latter 3 stages is just very horror influenced.
Oh,
the game starts out lighter than the first 2, I'd say. Maybe about as light as R-Type 3, and then it just gets exponentially darker. I don't know if it's just due to the PS1's enhanced graphical capabilities at this point, but it easily ends up, I think, the most disturbing endgame that the series has seen at this point. Right. I don't want to spoil what the final stage looks like, but holy shit! What is this?
Yeah, I guess if I won't be spoiling that, shameless self-promotion here. I have a recent stream on my channel where I play through the game using the R13 Cerberus. So you can see for yourself how weird that last level is.
Yes.
It
is weird.
Extremely, yes.
Another thing that I love about Delta is that there's a lot of fan service in one of the stages. It's sixth contact. Actually, earlier when I said sixth stage, I think that was the 7th. But anyway, the 6th stage is appropriately titled Evil.
Actually, that's the 5th stage.
Is that the 5th stage? You're right.
Sorry.
That is the 5th stage. Yeah, because there's only 7 stages in Delta. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was correct before. Yeah. 6th stage is the infected human base. Yeah. 5th stage is evil. And you are flying through this kind of submerged area. I want to say it's like an alternate dimension, or it appears that way, because I mean everything is like, bioorganic. But towards the end of the level, the music, which has been, mostly just kind of atmospheric, I don't want to say noise, but, just not really music in the traditional sense, finally picks up, and the stage itself starts to move a lot faster as well. And you are suddenly assaulted by several, I want to say they're called DOPs, which was...
the green things from stage 6 of the original.
Right. They just start flying at you. And, unlike the original, they're completely vulnerable instead of just like the red core on them.
Thankfully, yeah.
Right. So you're assaulted by a bunch of those, and it's kind of a gauntlet of dodging broken pieces of wall and the DOPs. Then, after that, the boss music kicks in, and all of a sudden, the circular mini-boss from the very first R-Type, which it's like a circular wall of lasers with a core in the middle.
The one you can pick off with one shot in the original.
Yeah, the ring. Yeah,
exactly. You face it as a boss, and the same strategy of waiting until you have a shot at the core will take it out in one shot. After defeating that, you see Gomander fly by in the background, and pretty soon you have to fight Gomander as it's I forget the name of the snakes are weaving around and getting in your way. And immediately after defeating Gomander, you have to face the Stage 3 battleship, but it is broken in half and is kind of rotating around the screen, so all the turrets on it, you have to kind of fight at an odd angle. And then the central core that shoots out a bunch of the blue orbs becomes the final boss of that level. So that entire level is just kind of a homage to a lot of the stage bosses of the first R-Type, which I think was absolutely fantastic.
Actually, the boss gauntlet alone does remind me a lot of the penultimate boss in R-Type 3 in that regard. Except this time, instead of it being a morphic entity, it's just like... It reminds me a lot of the ship graveyard in Gradius Gaiden, kinda.
And I guess I should say at the beginning of that stage too, you have like Gauper or something like that, Gauper, which are the enemies in the stage 2 of the first Gradius that will fly and attack you. While there are also broken red brain-like capsules that are spiraling through the level, which is actually part of the stage...
stage 2 from the original.
Yeah, background and architecture from stage 2.
So
I mean, that entire level is just a big reference to the first R-Type.
Right down to like a boss rush.
Right.
Indeed.
It does sound like it kind of conveys the idea of new ship, who dis?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the stage design and graphics just look really neat overall. It's like the first level is just like an out and out like city under siege, which I'm actually not sure the series has done before. It's an interesting terrestrial switch up, and like there's this large snake rampaging through it. Like the second stage is this like underwater base, this water base or reservoir or whatever that's also been infected. The second stage is immediately pretty goddamn tough, yes.
Yeah,
But it does have this really neat gimmick of when you go under the water, the music actually feels like you're submerged. It muffles itself, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great touch.
And then stage 3 is basically this game's version of the classic giant warship, except this time it's a massive, like, walking tank or carrier or whatever. Basically like a huge AT-AT. And you have to work your way around its what it's stomping through and its cannons and whatnot. And like old times, its core is the boss. Sidebar, but I kind of think that, like, the main sort of guitar, the synth riff in this stage sounds an awful lot like Rush's Between the Wheels. Dyer, if Rob, if you can confirm that whenever you go to listen to it, like, tell me I'm not crazy.
You're crazy.
I'll show you later then. I'm convinced of this.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm just saying you're crazy.
Okay, well, fair deal. And then stage 4 is like this large ascent. Like, stage 4 goes entirely upward through what looks like a space elevator, and there's all sorts of shit.
Vertical level, yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Taking stage 3 from R-Type 3 to its extreme. And then stage 5 is that wrecked enemy graveyard, so to speak.
Right.
And stage 6 is the infected home base, which is just a really nightmarish feeling level. And again, I'm not going to spoil the final stage. You just had to see it for yourself. Just lots of really, really cool level design, just lusciously brought to life. This is a case where R-Type is actually a rare case. It's like games in the 5th generation when 3D capability was a thing, some series would hit what was called the polygon ceiling, where a transition from 2D to 3D did not work out so hot for them. Yeah, pretty much. You could argue that Castlevania 64 turned out this way, although I actually quite like that game. But
a lot of people are running that with randomizers these days.
Holy shit, that's so cool!
Yeah, it's an archipelago.
I think 64 and Legacy of Darkness are very underrated. That's neither there. Delta, thankfully, doesn't change up the gameplay at all. It just actually does use the 3D graphics to just really good effect. It does at some points change like the perspective of your ship, and occasionally that can be tricky to deal with, but I usually don't have a problem with it.
Now I got
a couple other things mechanically that I forgot to mention. R-Type Delta borrows from Image Fight in that the speed power-up is gone. Instead, you can use the shoulder buttons to manually speed up or slow down your ship by 4 levels, which is a very welcome change.
Yeah, personally,
me.
I really like that amenity that you can control your speed. It just allows, I think, for more controlled tactics, and also you are in absolutely no danger of grabbing too many speed ups and just careening dead first into a wall with just a tap of the right button.
Yeah.
But speaking of careening into
I was going to add that. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. For whatever reason, they changed things in Delta going forward that you no longer take collision damage from the terrain. In fact, you can run right into it, and there'll be a nice little visual of sparks flying off of your ship, but it doesn't do any damage to you.
Wasn't it, though, that... Actually, I think I'm confusing it with Einhander, which also had a similar collision thing, but I think in Einhander, if you stayed against a surface for too long, you will actually blow up. In Delta, that never happens, does it?
I don't think it does, but I mean, then again, I usually don't make it a point to run into the walls in Delta with rare exception. So,
So, before we move on from Delta, I just wanted to say that when this came out, I was kind of at a transitional point in my life. I was working a lot more, going to school, so I didn't get to play as much as I wanted to. So Delta, unfortunately, ended up being more unplayed than played. So I never really got good at it. And eventually I had to sell my entire collection. Delta went with it. I got it back at one point, but then I had kids to deal with. And I really haven't touched it too much since. So my memory of it is a little spotty. I do remember getting slaughtered in stage 2, though. Absolutely slaughtered.
Yeah, I do want to say up Forneia, go ahead, you can.
I was just going to say I don't have a lot to comment on this one because I genuinely my lineage for the with the series goes play R-Type on Master System, be aware of the existence of Super R-Type but never get to play it, emulate R-Type 3 like a decade later. R-Type Final drops, and then from Final I learned that Delta exists.
I think I went the same route, or I mean very close to the same route. At least I did Final before Delta.
Yeah, and like I played Delta once for like a level, and like then I just kind of put it down, never picked it back up again, and now I can't really emulate it very well.
That's a shame. Well, if you can get to play Delta somehow, I do absolutely concur with Jim. It is very worth playing. I think the amenities that it makes the series, like with the speed and the different ships, all really cool. Design is exquisite. Like the graphics and soundtrack just work really well. It is just overall a really damn cool game, but once again, I keep saying the term skill issue, which I guess is like a modern gamer term or whatever. I'm not sure if I can say I like this one more than 3, because it is a lot more ball-crushing. Maybe not up to R-Type 2 levels of difficulty, but it does feel like a more vicious game than 3 did. When I replayed Delta recently just to research, compared to 3, where I was where I wiped out in the 3rd level of that because I was terribly out of practice, but I felt like I was able to get a ways in nonetheless. When I replayed Delta, I got terribly obliterated just in stage 2 alone, and it felt like that there were more gotchas with things just suddenly appearing off the edge of the screen that killed me.
Definitely in stage Delta 2, yeah.
It does feel like, compared to 3, which mostly was a bit more intelligent, sounds condescending. 3 was a little bit more thoughtful, I think, with its design, more accommodating. Delta feels like it's trying to restore the old school trial and error method of doing things that the first 2 games did, and I do have a bit less patience for this one than I do 3. Don't get me wrong, it is a really damn cool game and very much worth playing. Unfortunately, when you first get the game, your continues actually are limited, and when I just booted this one up, not having my old PlayStation memory card when I did play this initially, you get 5 continues to start. That did not get me past the stage 3 boss, and there were 4 more stages after this. And I have particularly bad memories of the 6th stage, especially the halfway point with what I call the penis cigar mid-boss.
Yep.
If that's accurate. I think its actual name is Nozari, but just like this giant, rather phallic-looking, mechanical, organic horror that takes up a massive amount of screen real estate, while a fuckload of enemies are just flooding in from everywhere, and this thing is also shooting several shots on its underside. That part is definitely this game's molten maze, and
that is the hardest section of the entire game.
I fucking hate it. I'm not gonna lie.
I was gonna say stage 7 is a breeze in comparison.
Yeah, the final stage is oddly considerably easier, which I guess maybe is sort of like a sort of Gradius-esque, okay, you did this really challenging thing, we're going to give you a victory run here sort of design, but Delta, I think, is just a lot more forcefully evil up front, and That's why I don't like it as much as 3. But the things it does add, like the dose system and the different wave cannons, those are all really cool. The game itself is still rad, and I would call it my second favorite R-Type. I just think 3's nicer, so I like 3 more. That's the bluntest cap that I can put on it. I will say, though, that you do get more continues the more you play, and it will eventually unlock free play after enough hours, which was actually the style at the time of console ship-ups. Radiant Silvergun did the same thing, so...
Ikaruga, at least on GameCube, did as well. I'm not sure about Dreamcast.
That sounds right. Anyway, Delta is very much worth playing, but it takes practice. I will say that.
Okay, Mike, that's time for you.
That's all I got. I'm good.
Okay, just one last thing, real quick. Did R-Type 3 have variable difficulty settings?
No.
It did not. Okay. Then that would be a first in Delta. It had 3 various difficulty settings, easy, normal, and hard.
It didn't do that bullshit, like, you can't get past stage 4 or 5 if you're playing on easy thing that 90s games did it?
No, it didn't do that. The biggest thing on easy is that you restart at a checkpoint and you already have a level 1 force.
Ooh.
So that's probably the biggest concession that easy gives you.
Hey, cool.
And, in addition to, enemies not being as aggressive, et cetera, et cetera.
Now,
go ahead.
As story-wise, there was actually another game which happens right around the same time as this. It was another Irem arcade game, and it doesn't necessarily seem connected to the R-Type series, but it actually is. It's called Armed Police Unit Gallop, aka Cybercop. It came out years before Delta, but I guess Delta retconned it to be part of that whole thing.
Cosmic Cop.
I got Cybercop. Oh well, either way. Cyber, Cosmic.
Cosmic, yeah.
I just call it Gallop.
Gallop's better anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gallop is better, yeah.
The word cop is somewhat loaded nowadays on top of that, so yeah.
Well, but it's definitely not your R-Type kind of shooter. It's more of a race game, actually. It's like a racing shooter.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know, unique in that regard.
It's also very brutal.
Yes.
Worse than R-Type 2 is the question that I have.
Not sure. I haven't played it enough to tell you.
Well, let's put it this way. Of the 3 between 2, Leo, and Gallop that I managed to play like 5 minutes of before getting on to this episode, because I was not able to get them running properly in a reasonable time frame due to technical issues. I cleared the first stage of 2 and Leo without dying. I couldn't get past the first stage of Gallop in 2 attempts.
Oof. Yeah, something about Gallop never really registered with me. I actually found that its pace was too fast in incongruence with how freaking large your sprite is.
Yeah, your player sprite is pretty huge.
It is a chunky ship.
Yep.
Yeah.
The ship has been eating donuts.
Yeah.
Well, it's a cop, isn't it?
It's an armed police
unit.
Joke, yes.
Isn't that the ship, the Peacemaker?
I think it's just the Gallop, isn't it?
Not sure. I didn't really look too far into that.
Hang on.
Yeah, I'm looking here too.
R-Type Final Museum, save me. Gallop.
So I want to say it's like the R11 or something like that.
I'm seeing the R11A Future World. Remote Garrison Enforcer uses the Gallop Force. Oh, and there's the Peacemaker, the 11B.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, it may well be the Peacemaker then. Yeah, that also uses the Gallop Force.
Yeah, R11B Peacemaker. Yep, is part of the Gallop Force. Yep.
Now, the last R-Type game I ever bought, brand new, was R-Type Final for the PlayStation 2, which as you might figure from the title, was supposed to be the final R-Type game because I think
supposed to be.
Irem closed down after that, or they got bought out or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have. I was gonna say I didn't have too much of a chance to play it because this was right around the time I had a major upheaval in my life happening, and I had to sell off all my PlayStation 2 stuff along with everything else I owned.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Final is a very, very interesting beast in the sense of it being, like, okay, this is never happening again, so we're going out with as big of a fanfare as we can. Mm-hmm. And just being like, okay, here's like every concept idea we ever had and just thrown into the blender with like all of like the little lore elements, story bits, all kinds of like other bits and bobs, and as much QOL as like they had learned over the years, such as softly touching a metallic floor as you're going across it is not going to make your ship implode. And various other elements, and then having 100 ships to select.
Now, I know we've gone into detail about the force units and stuff in the past. Let's not go into details about all those ships.
There's way too much.
There's a lot in Final. There's a lot.
And a lot
I do think it is worth mentioning that Leo does get the Leo bits in Final, and it is the only ship to get the Leo bits, I think, which honestly, like, I think that's one of my bigger criticisms about Final is the fact that it's like, okay, you can like unlock stuff to do things with ships, but you can't like go like super ham with that idea. You can't have the Ragnarok with Leo bits,
until closer to the end. The last 3 ships that you unlock, which is like the Curtain Call, and I forget the names of the others. But anyway,
there's like the grand finale or something.
Yeah, grand finale, Curtain Call,
and I think the other one's the Diamond Wedding. I remember that being like one of the weird ones.
Yeah, it was one of the weird ones. But anyway, they are like the final culmination of our series research. And you can freely choose any wave cannon, any bit device, and any force device that you want on these ships. So you have full customization.
Interesting. Now, aren't there a whole bunch of other...
Shout out to the platonic love.
Yes.
Aren't there also
yes.
a lot
of
R101
is grand finale.
Grand finale, okay.
Curtain Call. Last Dancer is 99. That's the other one.
Last Dancer and then Curtain Call. Okay, yep.
There's a lot of ships from other Irem shooters in there too, aren't there?
Yes. Yes.
Diamond Wedding was 98, and that's why I got confused.
Okay. Yeah, they're the OF-1 Daedalus, which is the ship from the Image Fight series, is one of the playable ships. With its like directional bit system. So it behaves similarly, but again, this is in a 2D or like a horizontally scrolling instead of a top-down shooter like the Image Fight series. One I think is a pretty obscure Irem shooter, Mr. Heli.
Yeah, Mr. Heli.
Yeah, I know of that one. Yeah,
I love that game.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mr. Heli's in here. Yeah.
Yep. So Mr. Heli, which that was actually the first time I'd ever heard of Mr. Heli, and it's like, oh, it's a POW armor with a helicopter that it drops bombs when you land on stuff and shoots a like upward missile if it's in the air. So I thought that was pretty cool.
On a side note, the first time I'd ever actually heard of Mr. Heli was that there's a secret message in the PC Engine version of Ninja Spirit where it actually, do you like Mr. Heli? And it's like, what the hell? What the hell is Mr. Heli? I gotta find this out.
Right? What the heli?
Exactly.
Yeah, what the heli? So, but no, Forneia is absolutely right. I mean, they went complete ham on every idea and lore bit and that they'd ever had with the series.
It's like they knew it was ending, so they were going to go out with the biggest bang as possible.
Right. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I thought was cool, just from lore standpoint with Final, is that there'd always been hints that humanity were using the Bydo as a weapon against the Bydo. That the Force device is actually created from Bydo cells. Well, this kind of takes that idea and runs with it, because there's a entire branch of R9 development where they use more and more of the Bydo tissue in the fighters.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the first one that you get that does that is the Cross the Rubicon.
Yep, Cross the Rubicon, which is interesting.
Which is a biblical reference for basically crossing over into hell.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Every ship is Jesus in purgatory.
And I was going to say, Cross the Rubicon is the ship that allows you to branch into that line of research.
That leads to the Cerberus.
And I was going to say that again leads to, I'll just say the fate of the Cerberus and leave it at that. But I absolutely love that is a reference in Final.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like bringing it all together.
Like, Final is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and it's so frustrating that it's on a platform that can't really handle what it wants to do.
Yeah, let me say this up front. I think that the ships and the variety of playable characters and the fan service that goes into all that are all really neat and all. But it is the best part of the game. Honestly, I think Final itself is kind of mediocre. I'm sorry. I'm not a huge fan of this game. Something about it just kind of feels flat, like their heart wasn't really in it as much this time. I don't know if there were budgetary and or time.
I mean, if they had to shut down, I think there were budgetary constraints.
Yeah, it is a good point. Yes.
Saying.
Yeah, but this game somehow looks cheaper than Delta does, despite being on the next generation PS2. I don't know how that works.
The third level in Final is a reprise of the battleship level.
Yeah, it's just the battleship,
and the frame rate crawls so long. It's the longest level in the game. It's like an 8-minute level for what should be 3. The first couple times through it, you're appreciative for the slowdown, because you can dodge stuff super easy and it becomes one of the easiest levels in the game. And after a few passes through it, because you'll be playing through it a lot to unlock new ships and all that other kind of good stuff, you realize, this is the worst part in the game.
Yeah, compared to 3, which I think mostly took things in new directions with its stage design, and Delta, which I think employed some new things on its own, but also had some very familiar and clever remixes of established series traditions. Final, in comparison, feels like it's just going through the motions. This is another airship stage. This is the Dobterikops again, or however you fucking pronounce it.
I don't know if I'd go that far. The second stage in Final is really cool. Because it's a highly variable stage depending on what you did in the last time you ran through it.
Yeah, that is one thing I will admit I think is pretty neat with this design. Depending on branching levels. Depending on
there are branching levels, yes.
Depending on some things you do, and even in at least one case, the ship that you pick, you will go to different stages. I will admit, however, I wasn't enthused enough with Final to actually explore all these different pathways, so I don't have as much to say about them.
There are 3 paths through the game.
3 different endings, anyway.
3 endings, yeah, basically. Yeah. They all diverge when you... I think it's finished stage 5, and then stage 6 will be the differing point.
Right.
And so, your first pass through, you're basically forced to go through the normal ending, like the path A, where you reach like the core of the Bydo, and deal the blow that will end the Bydo forever, because it is the final.
I will
R-type mission.
I will say, final stage A was actually the most memorable part of the game to me.
Oh, it's super memorable.
For a certain reason. I'll elaborate on that.
True.
It's incredibly memorable for many reasons. Let's be real.
I think it's the best part of the game, and I wish that as much forethought was put into it as most of the rest of the things before it. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little harsh on level. I think that the level design does pick up more overall in the latter half, but it does kind of feel like the first half is first 3 or 4 stages. It requires some.
The third level is the worst. The first 2 are fine. Honestly, I really like the second one, especially if you like the stage gimmick is you have 5 different climates that the level can be, and depending on the way you interact with the end boss of the stage will influence whether it remains the same climate, becomes wetter and colder, or hotter and drier. And the cold version of it, like the Arctic version, is figuratively and literally really cool. I go that way every time because screw the desert.
Yeah, it's fair. I admit I might have a lesser opinion on this game because it feels like what it did, Delta do better, but you're not that familiar with Delta Forneia, so I understand where you might have a higher opinion of Final.
You guys you guys keep talking for a minute. I'll be right back.
Okay, sure.
It gives you a lot to noodle around and experiment with, and I appreciate that because I'm over here doing adjacent to the speedrunning scene, so trying stuff out and seeing how it works out is really fun to me. That's one of the things that gives my brain a happy. And then they give you ridiculous ships like the Diamond Wedding, or excuse me, the Platonic Love, which fires the love wave cannon, which is pure concentrated energy of love, or so the scientists claim, and that cannot be officially verified. But in reality, it's a wave cannon shot that just auto homes on stuff to a degree. But it's still a big pink heart.
So I gather Final gets better the more you play it and the more you get familiar with it, but it is kind of a bit of an ask to get that investment.
It is. I will not defend that. It is.
Yeah, that's fair because I honestly, when I beat the final stage, the final stage A once, I didn't feel compelled to play this one too much more. I know that's on me. I know it's just. I don't know, something about this one just didn't grab me as much.
The payoff of the B route is worth it, though.
Oh boy, the B route. I still remember, each time you go into a level, you get a stage quote. You get a stage quote on the way out of the end of the B route, and I think I still remember it. Is no one happy to see me on this sunset evening? Oh, there is so much melancholy in the B route.
Oh yes.
I'm back, and did I miss anything? Is this the game that has that background I'm thinking of?
Yes.
Yes.
That's A route stage 6.
Yep, that's A route.
That's 90% of what I remember about this game. I'm sorry.
Is that the one that involves fertilizing?
You motherfucker! God.
Somewhat, yeah. I was going to say, arguably Delta more so.
Did that deliberately,
all I will say is that that was a frequent subject of discussion on the Game Pack boards way back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I think Rob shorted out my brain with that payoff. You motherfucking asshole. I am out of words right now.
I think this is the proof that Satanga has not experienced the platonic love.
Oh, come on. That's not... Wait, platonic. Okay. That's not a bust of my virginity. Okay, gotcha.
No, I know better than to do that. I'm not that kind of person.
Thank you. I appreciate
I know we all kind of collectively crapped on the third level of Final, mainly because of the slowdown. But in all fairness, there is a lot of slowdown in the third stage of Delta as well. Yeah,
that is
to me,
true.
It doesn't feel as egregious there to me.
I think with the huge freaking thing, moving, something about it, I don't know, being terrestrial and having much less room to maneuver generally, I think that makes it feel more justified.
Right.
Something about Final feels like there's this huge wide open space and it feels so slow that just felt more frustrating to deal with. I don't know.
Right.
I seriously feel like Final would, like, if you were to grade it with like a letter grade, it would skip up 2 whole letter grades if you put it on hardware and ran it properly and it just had a consistent frame rate through the whole thing.
Yeah, that might be another part why this didn't grab me. Delta, except for that third stage, was mostly very smooth. This time it's just
yeah,
a little, something about the game just feels a little sludgy. Like, I will admit that maybe from another angle that this game feels as dreary as it does really sort of sells like the melancholy of this being Irem's for then last bow, and it's just the most depressing game, and you really get a sense of that throughout its overall graphical and level design, and that is, I guess, sort of hauntingly beautiful in its own way, but just translating to a pure gameplay standpoint, it also just feels like it's not as exciting.
Well, if you want to argue positivity, there is Route C.
Yeah, I've read of this. I don't have the balls.
All I'm going to say about Route C is I've never actually succeeded it.
Yeah,
I have tried. I have tried. Boy, howdy, have I tried. I have not been able to finish it with the Ragnarok 2.
I dropped the difficulty down to whatever the easiest setting was, and I did it once.
Yeah.
That is an actual 7-minute level. You know this because it provides you with a timer, and you win when it expires.
Yeah.
And,
interestingly, it doesn't actually have a final boss, which I think was actually a fair mercy. It's really just a huge gauntlet.
It is an endurance match of a level, and it is a level that does not pull punches either.
My skill is not going to be enough for this, no matter how hard I try.
And you get one shot at it.
Yep. Yeah, that's the big thing. If you die in it, that's a game over. Like they do not give you. They do not like. There are no checkpoint. There are no continues.
Wasn't there like a special stage in one of the Parodius games that did the same thing, or am I hallucinating?
You're hallucinating.
Okay. Well, there was a special stage.
You may be thinking of like the actual final level in Gokujo Parodius, maybe?
Yeah, I know that one. Okay, you could continue on that one, but there were no checkpoints in it. That's what I think I'm thinking of.
Like that might be what we're looking at here.
Okay,
yeah.
But
the sexy Parodius boss rush you could not continue on. But
I just think that from a lore standpoint, it's the reasons for why you can't continue on that stage are interesting.
Yeah.
Curious.
Like, Final is an STG that makes you think a lot. Like it's like it's a shooter that stimulates your brain in manners that are not related to the actual gameplay, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
To coin a phrase, it's like the thinking man shooter.
The Elliot
wouldn't that be tactics?
Shoot 'em ups.
No, that's the strategic man shooter. That's not even a shooter.
Yeah,
I know it isn't. I know.
No, that's the shooter fans thinking man game.
Well, one would think that Final was the end, because it apparently was, and yet somehow, just in the past couple of years, we got R-Type Final 2.
And then 3, which is apparently 2, but with more stuff.
That's weird.
R-Type Final 3 evolved.
I never played 2 or 3 Evolved. I don't have much to say about it. I need a drink. I'll be right back.
There was also command/tactics, whether you are Western or Japanese.
But before we get into
technically came out after Final.
Yeah, I do want to bring this one up that I'd seen, but I haven't turned up anything on it. R-Type Flash of the Void, which said it was a PlayStation.
I saw you add that, and I have no idea what that is.
I've never heard of this.
Neither have I. It might have been, who knows, but apparently it's out there somewhere. So, but no one here has played Final 2 or 3 or any of that, because I know I haven't.
I had Final 2 on my Steam wish list for a long time, and then 3 is evidently out on like PlayStation 5 or something, and completely voids any reason at all to play Final 2. And I don't have a PS5, so
I don't have.
I have joked around that the system seller for me for the PS5 is R-Type Final 3 Evolved.
Honestly,
that's the only reason that I would want to get a PS5 at this point.
I stopped.
Yeah, kind of actually.
I stopped in the PS3 360 era, and I got no plans to continue. But yeah, so it's time.
One thing.
Oh, good.
I want to add concerning Final, and I'm not sure if either of you would recall or not, but I know that I bought R-Type Final for $20. Now, I don't know as if the game released at that price point or if I just waited to the point that it was in the bargain bin and I grabbed it for $20. But I think it would be kind of interesting if, it did release at that price point and, Art and Irem's just like, hey, we realize we're going out of business. We just want everyone to experience our last love letter to the series.
Well, I know in the U.S. it was actually released by an entirely different publisher. I think it was Eidos, of all people. And I seem to remember paying $30 for my copy.
Okay.
So, but that was, again, we're talking like, what, 20 years ago?
Well, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then I barely got to play the stupid thing.
Let's see here. Eidos published it in NA, and Metro 3D did it in Europe. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Nope,
yeah, Irem in Japan. Yeah, Eidos in North America, and Metro 3D in Europe.
But anyway, it's time we go ahead and touch on the R-Type games that actually aren't R-Type games, but they are R-Type games, I guess, kind of in a way, maybe. And we're just
they are, but they're not what you come to the series for the most part.
Right, and we're just going to lump these two together here. I know nothing about them other than that apparently they're like Cosmic Wars was to Gradius, which Cosmic Wars was a strategy game for the Famicom, which used the ships and scenarios from the Gradius games. So R-Type Tactics or Command, whatever you want to call it, apparently the same thing. I do say, I have to say though, I like the subtitle of the second one for some reason. Operation
Bitter Chocolate.
Yes, Operation Bitter Chocolate is like, I don't know where they come up with that, but okay.
I'm amused they came back to that. Good timing.
Yes. So, Jim, you're taking point on these because you know more about them than apparently the rest of us.
Okay. I recently played through R-Type Command, as it was called here in the States. R-Type Tactics is the same game, but it got the Tactics name. Yeah, got the Tactics name in Japan, and it was known as Command here. It is not a shooter whatsoever. It is a tactical strategy RPG. The game starts with you being a retired commander of Earth forces that is called once again into action with the emerging Bydo threat. Now, canonically, I'm not sure where this takes place in the timeline, but anyway, your task is to go through a few training missions and then launch towards the kind of Jupiter forward base. That it seems like the majority of the Bydo threat is entering the solar system at that point. So the game, it's a hex grid where you select units and choose their positioning in a turn-based fashion.
If you're at all familiar with Advanced Wars, they kind of have similar unit things where the more of a unit gets destroyed, the fewer actual entities in the unit exist to shoot at the enemy.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of going back to something like Desert Commander.
Yeah. Each unit is represented as a squadron of the same type of fighter. So you have kind of your flagship, which starts off as just a small little transport ship, and eventually through the game gets upgraded into a large battleship that has its own wave cannon that you can use, which I thought was kind of cool because it plays off the notion that the R-series wave cannons were adapted from large battleship cannons to just be used in a single manned craft.
Makes sense.
Yep. The big mechanic with this, and to kind of keep it in line with it being derived from a shooter, is that the majority of your ship's attacks cannot target anything behind it. So, the majority of your weapons, I think with the exception of missiles, can only be fired forward. So your ships only ever face, towards the right of the screen, and, you have to move yourself backwards if you want to fire at a target that's essentially past you. It also, kind of unique to the game, is how it handles wave cannons, where it takes a certain amount of turns to be able to charge up your wave cannon, and then when you fire your wave cannon, it is it takes up several hexes, and depending on the specific ship, the wave cannon has a different pattern. The challenge becomes if you take damage before your wave cannon is charged or before you're able to fire it, its charge will revert back to 0. So you have to deploy, in the case of the humans, AWACS units so that you can see further and kind of scout ahead, so that you can follow up with your ships that have been hanging behind, charging their wave cannons to get kind of attacks of opportunity before they are attacked and lose that charge.
I do kind of like the implication of given how long we know it takes for the wave cannon to charge in real time, it kind of implies that all these battles are happening in literal seconds.
Right. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is cool. Part way through the game, you face some of the boss enemies from the series, starting with the Dobkeratops, and its tail between every turn moves its position. So kind of in the game, if you hang out close to the tail, as with our graphic here, Forneia is in a very vulnerable position there. You run the risk.
I wanted to get a shot, but Zatanga got in the way and had to come down here.
Yep, there you go.
What? Huh?
It's poor tactical positioning on Mike's part. He's not even aiming at the head.
Hey, no fair. I'm trying to stay out of this discussion for now.
Another thing is PAL armor is another unit that you can control that becomes very vital, because your ships have limited ammo when it comes to their missiles. So you have to rely on the POW armor to be able to resupply and refuel your ships, because if your ships run out of fuel also, the unit will be lost. So there are 30 scenarios, I think, and then you reach what seems to be the end of the game, where you have to attack the Bydo core. But similarly to Route B in Final, after destroying the core, things aren't quite over, because there's a cutscene and your armada is assimilated into the Bydo. And then you have the second half of the game, where now you take control of a Bydo force and have to work your way back home to Earth, playing as the Bydo.
Jeez.
And
they just don't
so
cut him a
you
break.
have a what's that?
They just don't cut him a break.
No. And the story, it's not really, it's not that great, but you get to like little snippets of like the commander's diary between missions. And after starting the Bydo campaign, it's just kind of like a lot of confusion. It's like, where are we? What are we doing here? The only prevailing thought that any of us have is that we want to go home. And you come to realize that you playing as the Bydo, they don't even realize that they are Bydo. They think they're still human, and they can't understand why the other human forces are attacking them.
Mm-hmm.
So
and that's consistent with Route B's ending.
Exactly. Yeah. So I thought the same kind of melancholy of the series is definitely present in Command, because you have the tragic ending of okay, we're victorious, we defeated the Bydo, but oh no, wait, we became the Bydo. And
John, you are the demons, and then John was a zombie.
Right. and as I think people are less likely to play the Command games than they are the main R-type games, I'll go ahead, kind of spoil the ending to Command. You fight your way back from the Bydo dimension all the way back to Earth and launch an assault on the Earth forces, destroying kind of the main flagship of the Earth forces. But it's at that point that you realize that, oh, wait a minute, we're not human anymore. We realize now what we are, and that we will never have a home. So the entire Bydo force turns to flee back into space, and then you see reinforcements from the humans arrive and obliterate what's left of your armada. So, once again, bleak, unhappy ending.
Yeah. Now, the second one, Operation Bitter Chocolate, that's entirely in Japanese still, right?
It is. Now, next year sometime, I'm not sure what they've moved the release date to now, R-Type Tactics 1 and 2 Cosmos will be coming out on, I think, most modern platforms. And it collects Tactics 1 and 2 and adds a kind of smaller scenario that is unique to the game. And so it will be the first time, although I think there may have been like some translation efforts for Bitter Chocolate, but it will be the first time that it appears in English and can be fully played and experienced. I don't know as much about that, but I know the plot revolves around a civil war between Earth and the Granzella faction, which happens to be the name of the company who has released R-Type Final 2. I thought that was kind of interesting that they named themselves that. But it begins with that, and then the Bydo invade, and it's like now Earth and Granzella have to join forces to fight the Bydo threat. And then you turn around halfway through and play as Bydo again, and then I know you work your way past the Earth, and then you fight like some other force known as the Solar Envoy, which now this is a part of the lore that I know nothing whatsoever about. So
at least they could do is work with Konami and have them cross over with Gradius at some point.
Right.
Make G-Type become a reality.
I was going to say there's a fan
G-Type
game by the name of G-Type I remember from long ago that seemed like a really cool idea.
Awesome, yeah. But no, I was going to say, if you're at all a fan of strategy games, I think it's a decent playthrough. I mean, it's not the best turn-based strategy RPG out there, but I enjoyed my time with it. It had some mechanics to it that were unique to it, and I think if you at least like the genre and you're a fan of R-Type, it's worth checking out.
If I did, I probably
would. It is worth noting that Command/Tactics is a PSP title.
Yes, I didn't mention that. Yep, it's exclusive to the PSP.
Yeah,
the PSP was like spin-off central when it was a thing.
Really.
Like God of War got spin-offs, Like a Dragon got spin-offs. Jack and Daxter got one that was just Daxter, as I recall. Interesting,
really good.
Interesting little portable, I gotta say.
Also, had some really good Konami compilations on there.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. I got all of them. Even
sadly, a lot of the shooter ones were Japanese exclusive, but
of course,
at least we did get the Gradius collection.
Thankfully, the language barrier isn't much of a problem, and there were no region locking on the PSP either. So I made sure to get all of them, and I'm glad I did. Very cool things.
Good job. Anyway, that kind of brings us to the conclusion of the Bydo missions. So,
yep.
We are going to wrap this up. I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to get pretty tired.
Yeah, I admit after exfoliate, wasting 20 minutes on the Molten Maze, I had to shut up for more or less the rest of the broadcast.
Yep. That's why I gave you a wake-up call.
Yeah,
that is fair. So yeah, overall, coming back in this series, I was a little worried I was going to be more down on R-Type than I thought I would be, because I'm not as good at them anymore, and I don't have as much patience for memorizing the Spandau ballet that you got to fly through with some of the stages. But like with the Ghosts and Goblins stream, no, I gotta say for the most part, I still really do like this series. At the least, I really like the original Leo 3 and Delta a lot. At the risk of sounding like a bit of a bitter old man, I ironically say, knowing that I'm the youngest of the 4 hosts here. And I still have grays in my beard, Jesus. Delta was kind of like the last buck for me, and Final just didn't seem as flavorful, and the series feels like it just didn't feel as flavorful for me later on, and since I wasn't so impressed by Final, that's why I never got Final 2. But for what we did get in the 20th century for the series, even if I don't have as much patience to play some of them, I still really respect R-Type. I just love the visuals, and on a good day, if I'm feeling bolder, then yeah, I would actually like to play through all these games again. R-Type 2 can still kind of bite itself, but I guess I got a little bit more respect for it after talking it out. So Super R-Type can fuck off, though. So
yeah. Super R-Type would be way better if it actually had checkpoints. That's the real thing, honestly.
That's some never forgive action, as Strong Bad would say.
Yeah, because I mean, imagine having to do the Molten Maze, both directions, with no checkpoints in between.
No.
Ow. Yeah, glad they learned their fucking lesson for R-Type 3. Holy shit.
Well, all I can say is I gotta play more Delta.
Oh, you do, definitely. And Forneia, if you can somehow, you do also.
I have no objections to doing so should the possibility become available.
Righto.
Hopefully I won't get slaughtered on stage 2 again.
Personally, though, I would prefer to see if I can emulate Final and hardware accelerate the thing so it doesn't have slowdown. That sounds like a time.
Yeah.
If that could be done,
that sounds like a good time.
If you can do that, let me know if the results do make it more flavorful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it's just stage 3 is bad. Everything outside of that is fine, pretty much.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'll be interested to see if Final 3 Evolved is the final R-Type.
yeah,
We'll find out, won't we?
it's starting.
They
to
had to
become-
go with the subtitle "Final," didn't they? Jesus.
Yeah, it's starting to become the Final Fantasy of shooters.
Yeah.
Right,
exactly.
yeah. I mean, to be fair,
let me see something. Yeah, like, in fairness, it's not Irem anymore. That was Irem's final R-Type.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they should have picked a different name for 2 then.
Yeah, Resurrection or
Rebirth.
Yeah.
Something
Or
like that. Yeah, Final
Yeah,
2.
something.
Final 2 is the weird title. Yeah.
R-Type
Yeah.
rises from the grave.
Yeah. It should. It should have just been
R-Type- Ooh, R-Type regrown.
Yeah. It should have just been unfinal.
Or regrowth.
Isn't that easy enough?
Unfinal.
R-Type fertilized.
No, that means it's made. That's going to be made. If you call it unfinal, it's going to be made by that one like indie dev who tries to make funny games that are not as funny as anyone wishes they were.
Oh
But
shit!
I think it was pointed out that it could have been called Unfertilized.
Good night, everybody. Please, good night, everybody.
Anyway, just to wrap things up, in 2 weeks we're going to be having another stream. It's going to be a round table, and we're going to go pretty far back in history for this one. It's going to be on the golden age of consoles. So the early Atari stuff and television, ColecoVision. If you had a soft spot for those consoles and want to hear us jabber on about them for a while, make sure you stop in then.
Yo.
Mostly predates me, but it'll be an interesting discussion.
Plus with the...
I will be there.
Yes. And what with the Atari 2600 Plus having just come out, there's actually been a lot of interest that's been rekindled, at least in that console.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it's good stuff. I was raised on Atari, so hopefully we will see you all then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So until then, everybody have a fun and have a good night.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Take care.